Hello and welcome to East Gippsland Shire Council's meeting of Tuesday the 5th of October 2021. The East Gippsland Shire Council live streams, records and publishes its meetings via webcasting. These recordings are available for viewing by the public and may be publicly shared by Council. During the meeting, any members of the public who are addressing the Council will have their image and comments recorded. No other person has the right to record council meetings unless approval has been granted by the chair. In line with the Local Government Act 2020, councillors are able to attend council meetings electronically or in person, and the meetings will be open to the public via live streaming. Members of the public are invited to view the live streamed council meeting by following the link on council's website or Facebook page. If council encounters technical difficulties with the live streaming during the meeting, we will adjourn until the issue is resolved. If technical issues can't be resolved, the meeting may be postponed to a later time or date. East Gippsland Shire Council acknowledges the Gunai-Kurnai, Monero and the Bidawal people as the traditional custodians of this land that encompasses East Gippsland Shire and their enduring relationship with country. The traditional custodians have cared for and nurtured East Gippsland for tens of thousands of years. Council values their living culture and practices and their right to self-determination. Council pays respects to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people living in East Gippsland, their elders, past, present and future. We have two councillors attending virtually this evening. A councillor's attendance can only be recorded as present at a council meeting when the councillor can confirm that they meet all of these criteria. They can hear the proceedings, they can see other members in attendance and can be seen by other members, and they can be heard when they speak. I'll now confirm with our two councillors in turn. Councillor Buckley, can you see and hear us?
Yes, Madam Mayor.
And can you confirm that the location that you are participating from is secure to ensure that confidential items can be dealt with in a confidential manner?
Yes, I can confirm that, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. Councillor Greeson, can you see and hear us?
Yes, I can, Mayor Mendy.
Thank you. And can you confirm that the location you are participating from is secure to ensure that confidential items can be dealt with in a confidential manner?
Yes, I can, Mayor Mendy. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Greeson. Item 1.2 is for apologies. Mr. CEO, please.
Thank you, Mayor. We don't have any apologies. However, I will note that there is an apology listed in the agenda for Councillor Gresham, who has been able to join us remotely. So the minutes will reflect her attendance as opposed to what's actually in the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. Item 1.3 is for declarations of conflict of interest. Councillors, are there any declarations this evening? I see none.
Sorry, Madam Mayor. Yep.
Yes, Councillor Buckley.
Yes, I'd like to declare a conflict of interest for item 5.3.1, sadly.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. When we get to that item, I'm sure you will remember to raise the item again and to remove yourself from the meeting. Thank you. Item 1.4 is for the confirmation of the minutes. Councillors, this is for the council meeting held on Tuesday the 14th of December. Do I have a motion, please? Sorry, September. What did I say?
December. September will do.
September, we'll go for September. Councillor Reeves, you move the motion. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Stowe. Is that motion opposed? No, I'll put that motion to the vote. All those in favour? Councillor Buckley, I can't see your hand. Are you abstaining? Oh, sorry, I just need to... I can see your hand now. Okay, thank you. Yes, you have a question, Councillor White?
I do, Madam Mayor, because you raised your hand, but I don't believe you were here.
Oh, okay. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for pointing that out. Yes, that's absolutely correct. You chaired that, yes. I think we might take that vote again, if that's okay. So we have a motion on the table to accept the minutes. Councillor Reeves has put the motion. Councillor Stowe has seconded the motion. We'll put that motion to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. The motion is carried. Item 1.5 is for the next meeting. The next meeting of Council will be on Tuesday the 26th of October to be held in the Corporate Centre at 273 Main Street, Bensdale, commencing at 6 p.m. Item 1.6, requests for leave of absence. Mr CEO, are there any requests?
None have been received, Mayor.
Thank you. Item 1.7 is for open forum. Do we have any petitions, Mr CEO?
Mayor, there are no petitions or questions of council. However, under item 1.7.3 public submissions, we have two people, Lisa Herbert from Givet and Richard Hoxley, who can speak, and then Richard Hoxley, who will speak at item 5.3.2.
Wonderful. Thank you. And we have Ms. Herbert online. Hello, good evening. Ms. Herbert, can I call you Lisa? Is that all right?
You certainly can.
Thank you. You might have a very close view of the councillors around the table, but you can
I can
probably...
see some waves.
Yes, exactly. So welcome to our meeting, and we're looking forward to your presentation this evening. I've sort of thought around 10 minutes might be a good allocated time. Does that suit what you had in mind?
Absolutely, even less if you like, depending on your questions.
It'd be great to have some time for questions if that's possible. Right. Well, thank you. The floor is yours.
Awesome. Look, thank you very much for the time. My name is Lisa Herbert. I'm based on Gunai-Kurnai country, just near Maffra, and I work for a not-for-profit called Give It. Now, I just wanted to touch base with you all because we're about to reach a fairly significant milestone in our work towards bushfire recovery in East Gippsland. So what Give It is a national online donation platform. We've been working with the Victorian government to assist people impacted by the bushfires last year. In the weeks following the disaster, the Victorian government engaged us to manage the distribution of donated goods to affected communities. Now, as part of this process, one of the many things we've been doing is working with BRV, Bushfire Recovery Victoria, for more than a year now to furnish short-term modular houses in East Gippsland and also Towong Shire. So we've been working with bushfire support workers through the case support network to identify the need, and good old donors with kind hearts, both individuals and corporate donors, have donated to us, and as such we've been able to help furnish these short-term modular houses. So we've been able to help those houses become homes. So the milestone that we're about to reach is the big 50. So as of the end of next month, end of October, we will have assisted 51 families and individuals as part of this project, furnishing their new accommodation with household essentials, things like white goods, a couch, a bed, everything down to the linen and the toilet brush. Those are the kinds of things that Give It has been able to put into people's little homes while they work on their property and work towards rebuilding. So as I mentioned, we facilitated these donations as part of our work that we do with corporate donors, individual donors, partners, everyone from Bunnings to Sealy, IKEA, for example. But the majority of donations were spent locally. So we were actually able to use local businesses to buy furniture wherever possible. There were a few delays, good old COVID getting in the way of manufacturing, and delivery of some goods, but we worked around that. The local businesses in Bairnsdale in particular have been phenomenal in working with us. So I just wanted to give a shout out to your local businesses where we've been able to spend tens and tens of thousands of dollars with those local businesses furnishing these short-term modular houses. There is a video that I'd love you to share on your social media. It just shows what we've been doing and what a short-term modular house actually looks like. So that's the short-term modular housing. Just one of the things we've been able to achieve so far in our work. Secondly, and this is something I'd love your support on, is I just wanted to let you know about the COVID-19 relief program. As it continues, we've had a significant supporter and sponsor come on board. RACV has come on board specifically with the aim of wanting to help families and individuals in COVID-affected communities, which obviously is just about everywhere. And their focus in particular is regional areas. So they've donated a fair bit of money towards alleviating COVID. So I'm calling on you perhaps to let your support organisations within the council Shire, support organisations, local community groups, anyone who's got their eyes and ears open in the community and can identify essential needs of people who are doing it tough are eligible to register with us and then make requests on behalf of those affected families. So, yeah, pretty much so. We really encourage and ask for your support to let everyone in the Shire, those groups, know that Give It is here to assist not only in bushfire recovery, but also COVID-19. And that could be anything from, someone in your community not being able to make ends meet, struggling to put fill their pantry with groceries. And so someone could make a request, a support organisation could make a request on their behalf for a $200 Coles voucher, a $20 voucher, for example. And once they make a request on our Give It website at giveit.org.au, kind, amazing donors can come forward and then fund those requests. It might not be grocery vouchers, it could be something more significant and substantial. For example, someone bushfire affected has loose wiring from a storm or something hanging from their ceiling and just doesn't have the funds to be able to get an electrician in to fix their roof. They've lost their job because of COVID. That request for an electrician can be made on the Give It portal, where either a really kind-hearted electrician can come forward and donate his time or her time, or we can pay for a electrician to come and fix that house, because we would consider that to be an essential need. The safety and well-being of the family living in that house needs that, that wiring fixed. So the things we can help with are really, really quite diverse. So just to sum up, that's just some of the work Give It has been doing and continues to do in East Gippsland, and we just need more support organisations to come forward and ask for our help, because we are here to help the helpers. We want to help support organisations and community groups who know where their need is in their community. We want to help those people.
Wonderful, wonderful. Lisa, can I ask the first question? Because there is at least one around the table. Could you just tell us a little bit about your organisation? I think you're a Queensland-based organisation, is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been operating in the disaster recovery space for more than 10 years in Queensland, and our model is quite unique. So Give It goes where our operating expenses are covered by either government grants or philanthropists or fundraising. So virtually I'm a government contractor, and the reason we do it this way is so when people donate to Give It, 100% of the donations we receive goes to where the intent is. So we're relatively new in Victoria. We were only called upon by the Victorian government in February last year to come down and help. So we've been established in 10 years in Queensland. We've done everything from floods to cyclones to fire recovery. Up until a few years ago, then we moved down into New South Wales, where we did a lot of drought work, and then obviously COVID, fires, floods, So
Yes.
yes, we're moving around the country. Yeah.
Gosh.
So yeah, not-for-profit, we manage offers of donated goods, services, volunteers and funds. And we have relationships with corporate donors. We find, even this morning, I'm going to give you an example. We had a corporate donor donate to bushfire recovery in Victoria even now, and that was a 5-figure donation. So there's a lot of community groups, there's a lot of corporate organisations who want to help, but they don't know help, so they turn to Give It and say, here you go, here are the resources you need, you know where the need is, go spend our money wisely. That's exactly what we do.
Wow. Thank you. We'll just take a question. John, Councillor White has got a question, and then Councillor Allen, please.
Good, thank you, Lisa, and well done. You are obviously extremely community-minded, and that's one of my pet subjects. So my question now is that in terms of where you might assist, so a couple of organisations that I'm familiar with here in Bairnsdale, where we have a neighbourhood house, and St Vincent de Paul, both of which have like a walk-in large pantry stocked with goods, and of course those people that they're supporting, they know who they are. Is that where you're coming from, that you might just send them a few boxes of cornflakes, Wheat Bix, powdered milk, all that sort of stuff to those people on the ground here in our Shire that would know who the needy people are?
Absolutely. For example, the neighbourhood house you speak of at Bairnsdale is registered with us. Just last week they made a request for, I can't remember what the item, might have been a fridge or a generator or something like that. So we would use them. We'd probably prefer not to deal in food, though we do that, and we do a lot with Bor Food Relief, for example. We also do Gippsland Farmer Relief. But we would really like to utilise them for not only food, but because they're meeting these people, and sure, give them the cornflakes, but what else do they need? Do they have warm bedding? Do their lights work? Do they have enough firewood to keep warm? So they would be our eyes and ears into the community to find more need. Absolutely, we would relish that opportunity.
That's actually a very good point you've raised, because the St Vincent de Paul, who look after a lot of the homeless people, have actually been, when they've got the funding, giving these people a roll-up swag that gives them somewhere warm and safe, because they don't have a home, they don't have a roof over their head. So would that be of a material thing that you could probably provide some of those?
Oh, absolutely. And so we would ask, and the salvos aren't registered with us, but we would love them to get in touch with us and register, because they could give an example. Homeless dad of 3 living in a car needs school uniforms and 2 swags for his family, for example. That request then sits on our website, knowing that COVID is exacerbating homelessness all over the place. We would then dip into our COVID funds. If a donor didn't come forward, and it's unlikely a donor wouldn't come forward in that circumstance with that story, we could dip into those COVID funds and physically buy those goods, whatever that may be, whether it be the school uniforms or the shoes or that kind of thing. So yeah, that's how we work.
Lisa, I'm sure that there'll be lots of ideas around the table from councillors and, projects that are known about. And we might just, after our meeting, we might ask our officers to collate some of those ideas and be back in touch with you. I think that's the most efficient way of doing it. But Arthur, Councillor Allen had a question also?
Not so much a question, just to say, Lisa, that you're obviously doing great work in our community, and I think we should be very, very grateful that organisations such as yours have come and helped people who have been in desperate need, but have continued to help them for the longer term, and with the practical things, as you say, whether it's a load of wood to keep warm or whatever it is. So congratulations on the fantastic work you're doing.
Thanks, Councillor. I've got the best job in the world.
Wonderful. Well, we might have to move on with our meeting, but I'd just like to thank you for speaking with us about your work, and I'd just like to underline what the previous councillors have said also, your work sounds quite extraordinary. Thank you for helping, particularly the people of East Gippsland. We know that they've been in strife and in need of help from all sorts of people. It's quite extraordinary that our local businesses too are often the ones to respond to our own local community. So that's really heartening too. But helping 50 families furnish their homes, that's quite an amazing achievement. So congratulations and thank you for all the work that you do. Great to meet you, Lisa.
I appreciate your time, and I'll pass on your thanks to my bosses. All right, thanks so much, guys.
Thank you. Great, bye-bye. Amazing. Wonderful. So we'll move on. Notices of motion, and I don't believe we have any notices this evening, Mr. CEO. Good. And we don't have any deferred business. So we'll move on to item 4, which is for councillor and delegate reports. And I don't know which way we go around the table. Are we up to you, Councillor Crook? Can we start with you, with your councillor report, please?
Yeah, sure, we can start with me. We did that last week too, but that's okay. I was on the other side.
Okay.
So, he's going this way. Look, it's been an interesting time over the last couple of weeks since our last meeting. I guess one of my highlights has been visiting some of our more remote communities, and I attended the Snowy to Errinundra Community Recovery Committee meeting recently and spoke with its members from Bonang, Tubbut, Dedick, Goongra and Bendock. And this really illustrates to me what a huge shire we have and the challenges being faced by this and many other similar remote area communities. And I'll just highlight a few now for the benefit of those listening and my fellow councillors. These communities are really concerned about health services and the fact that the current bush nurse service, which provides basic medical care for around, including vaccinations, to around 70 remote area residents, is looking to be cut, unfortunately. I think it's federally funded at this point in time, but that funding is going to run out. It's currently funded at 4 days a week. It's looking to be cut back to 2. And there's no prospect at this stage or no clarity around whether that role will be funded into the future or how those services will be delivered. So people are very concerned about that. The Recovery Committee clearly has a real zeal for nature-based tourism and our emerging visitor economy, with talk of caravan parks in Bendock, the gateway to the Errinundra, as they like to be known, and new nature trails, and really capitalising on those natural assets that they have up in that part of the Errinundra and surrounds the Snowy River and the like. But I guess this really highlighted for me the need for supporting infrastructure. And while that may not be the direct responsibility of council, more maybe the state and federal governments, there's obviously a role for our council to support these communities in their endeavours to be more economically sustainable in the future. There were some concerns raised about the appropriateness of the current zoning in some of the rural settlements and a desire to see flexibility for small lot sizes and, should we say, less conventional developments under our new rural land use strategy as we develop it. So they're keen to have some input into some of that. It was also great to see some BRV consultants, Bushfire Recovery Victoria consultants, there working with the communities. But they expressed a bit of a concern over the small scope of some of the existing projects, and that they were really sort of going for the low-hanging fruit, whereas they have a desire to think much bigger for their district. So it was a bit of an eye-opening experience. It's a long way up there. It seems like a long way from the more metropolitan areas of our Shire. So I encourage other councillors to get out and about, and I made a commitment to them that I would be back, and I think I'll try and get round to as many of our community recovery committees right across the district as I possibly can in coming months. I might leave it there. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you, Councillor Crook. Councillor Stowe, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I have nothing significant to report this meeting.
Okay, thank you. Councillor White, please.
Thank you. Of a similar vein, it's just been, say, routine staring at the screen at meetings, planning consultation meetings, but something that I actually was not involved with, and I'll go back up to where Councillor Crook was talking about, that really tickled my fancy in seeing two horses ride into the vaccination site. I think it may have been in Goongur or Bendoc.
Bonang, I think.
Bonang, sorry. Bonang, and of course I actually did recognise one of them as somebody that I've met before, and I just thought, yeah, good on you, that's the Aussie way of doing things, and it was good to see that they participated, but as I say, rode in on horseback to get their needles. That was great.
Thanks, Councillor White. Councillor Allen, please.
Thanks, Mayor Mendy. I'd just like to make mention of the fact that the exhibition that was in Lakes Entrance over Easter, called The End of an Era, which was a photographic and oral history of the last 10 fishermen on the Gippsland Lakes, has been nominated for an award in the Victorian Community History Awards. So I would like to put on record my appreciation to Nikki and Lee Henningham, who were the photographer and oral historian that drove that, and for Linda Mitchelson, who sourced the funding, drove the project, manned the exhibition, and is hoping to bring it back to Paynesville next year. So well done to them. And the other thing that I really enjoyed today was Councillor Crook, Councillor Stowe, Councillor Van Diggle and myself made an unexpected, unannounced visit to the Paynesville Men's Shed this morning. And we were very well received, and I was just absolutely astounded at the facilities that they've got. And I thank them for their hospitality.
Thanks, Councillor Allen. Councillor Van Diggle.
Thank you. I don't have that much to report either. I attended the planning consultation 2 weeks ago for the boat and caravan storage facility. I just appreciated hearing from all the objectors as well as the proponents. So that was my first planning consultation I've been able to attend, and it was really insightful. I also attended Paynesville Men's Shed this morning, which we rocked up unannounced. I think they were very surprised to see us there, but we ended up sitting down and having about an hour's worth of conversations. A lot of stuff about renewable energy and just, I guess, the needs of the residents, and also what the Men's Shed means to the local people. And I've lived in Paynesville for many years and actually never checked out the facility, and I look forward to returning there. And I also was just thinking, I actually attended the Social Enterprise World Forum last week. So that was a world forum, but the Gippsland Len actually organised a bit of a hub where we were able to learn about social enterprises in East Gippsland. So I actually just want to draw reference to the people that were there, because I think that social enterprise isn't really considered here as a part of, I guess, our economic development, but it's actually so important that these guys are giving back to the community as well. So there was Catherine Mullett from Deadly Wares, Jess John and Jill Hermans from The Foundry, Molly from Race Gippsland, and Rachel Murphy from Bairnsdale Repair Cafe, and Andrea Lane and Beth Ripper from the Gippsland Community Power Hub and Float, and just learning about all of this and how hard it was to actually establish in the community, but what they're doing for the community at the moment, and say the work that Float's doing, and looking at walking tours in Lakes Entrance and how we can potentially capitalise on that as a tourist attraction, I suppose. Like, I go overseas and I always go on walking tours, so it's just exciting to see what's happening in that space. And I believe that the video is accessible online as well, so you can learn more about these social enterprises across East Gippsland. So.
Terrific. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Van Diggle. Councillor Reeves, please.
Thanks, councillors. Woman Ingie, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity tonight. I want to share three particular things over the last few weeks. I want to give a big shout out to the many community organisations who have applied for and sought support from the council for their Black Summer Bushfire Recovery Grant applications. There have been dozens and dozens of organisations across the Shire who are committed to our Shire to invest in our community. And I've just been amazed at the energy and commitment from those organisations. And it's been a great pleasure to be acting in your absence, Mayor, to be able to sign on your behalf and the council's behalf the support letters for those applications. And even if we got a fraction of those grants up through those applications, the impact and the benefit to the community would be significant. Secondly, I'd like to congratulate the organisations, the business organisations and enterprises who have applied for and who I suspect might have a little bit of success at the Gippsland Business Awards. Now, several of our local businesses have been nominated and shortlisted, and I want to give a big shout out to them. It takes a bit of effort to apply for and be nominated, but it's a great achievement in this particularly difficult year that we've had to keep their businesses going. And I really wish them well for Friday night. So there is a virtual presentation night for those Gippsland Business Awards, and go East Gippsland businesses. Lastly, the Australian Citizenship ceremony the other week was an absolute triumph, councillors, and it was a great delight to be able to be there. In a COVID-safe environment, we welcomed 12 new citizens and celebrated their commitment to becoming Australian citizens. And I want to thank you, CEO, your officers for their work in making that event really successful and special for those people. Very memorable. And I have to say, citizenship ceremonies, councillors, are one of the most special and emotional events that I think we have a great honour to be able to undertake under delegation from the Federal Minister.
Thank you, Councillor Reeves. Councillor Buckley, do you have a councillor report you'd like to present?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, I have had the pleasure of sitting with the Marina Consultative Committee this last week, and I feel that they're a committee that has a lot to offer the community, and I'm in great support of them and learning a lot about that important area in our community. So that was one thing that I did. As you well know, I sit on Timber Towns Victoria, and I just wanted to give a brief update in regards to the current situation. So, as we well know, in November 2019, the Victorian government announced its plan to phase out native forest logging by 2030. The government's policy is to transition the remaining native forest timber industry to plantation timber. Only $120 million is offered as a transition package for the whole of Victoria. A recent economic report shows that the industry is worth $311 million per annum across 2 eastern shires in Wellington and East Gippsland alone. So therefore, it certainly doesn't come anywhere close to compensating. So the economic impact, according to Vic Forest Native Timber, contributes around $500 million to the economy per annum. The loss of the native timber industry jobs will have a devastating flow-on impact to workers in small regional communities and for downstream construction industries. These flow-on effects need to be fully understood. It's not just timber workers who will lose their jobs. So in conclusion, a ban on Victoria's native timber industry means the timber required for construction and furniture manufacturing industries will be sourced from other jurisdictions, including unregulated overseas markets, which harvest timber from rainforests we cannot be generated. And also in combating climate change, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change 6th assessment report states that sustainable forest management can increase and maintain forest carbon sinks throughout harvest, transfer of carbon to wood products, and their use to store carbon and substitute emissions-intensive construction material. The native timber industry thus provides a climate solution. The industry also improves forest health by regenerating forest areas badly damaged or killed by high-influence fires. So that was just a report from Timber Towns Victoria that I think that a lot of our constituents, especially in the timber industry, would appreciate, and that I think that it further bolsters our understanding, which all councillors have been briefed on silviculture, and we've got a greater understanding of how we can support East Gippslanders. And that's the end of my report, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. Councillor Greeson, do you have a councillor's report, please?
Thank you, Mayor Mendy. I really haven't been to much in the last 3 weeks for council business, apart from the usual council work. But I just wanted to say how incredibly impressed I am with the East Gippsland community with respect to their COVID vaccination response. So 89% are vaccinated with their first vaccine now, and the second vaccination rates are 63.5. So I think people should be really pleased with themselves. It's so important. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Greeson. I have a very brief report this evening too, because I've been on leave for the last 2.5 weeks, and I would like to sincerely thank Councillor Reeves for stepping in to the Mayor's role while I was on leave. I had a wonderful break. It was, while I love East Gippsland dearly, it was nice to get off the block briefly and had a nice, lovely camping holiday up near Mildura. We weren't planning to stay there for very long, but we couldn't find a sort of a safer place really following all the COVID news. So it was quite a relief to come back to East Gippsland following on from Councillor Greason's comments, and to enjoy some of our beautiful natural environments. Had a couple of nights out on the Gippsland lakes, which was absolutely delightful. So I just wanted also to follow on that COVID theme and the vaccination theme and thank all members of our community who go to such efforts to follow the regulations and to keep themselves and our community as safe as possible during this time, and to encourage people to keep getting their vaccinations. I'm also really pleased when I hear of people who share accurate information and advice about the vaccines, because I know there are a number of people who are a bit hesitant about getting it. So thank you for all the work that's been done. Helps to keep us all safe and helps to keep our health services from being too stretched. I also have been very mindful about the situation in Melbourne, and I know many of us enjoy going to Melbourne, and I really have sympathy for those people still in lockdown down there, and hope that we can do whatever we can to support those people in Melbourne. I was going to also mention those letters, the letters of support that have gone out to those, to the applicants for the bushfire recovery grants. This is the national program. That round finishes tomorrow. So, and I believe there've been around about 50 letters. I'm surprised it's only 50, but it's a lot of activity in our community of people wanting to do things. So, just wishing all those applicants the best of luck, and I'm sure there'll be many wonderful projects funded through that program. Yeah, and just to say how disappointed the councillors are always when community events have to be cancelled. We really miss being out and about in the community, although it's great to hear of ways to do it in a COVID-safe way. So we're really looking forward to getting out there as soon as we can. Wonderful. So we will now move on to officer reports, and item 5 on our agenda under assets and environment. 5.1.1 is for a contract, 1432 for bituminous, I've been practicing that, sealing, and I'll hand over to our General Manager of Assets and Environment, Ms Weigel, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I think I'm going to call it the bitumen sealing contract.
Yes, that's a good idea.
Councillors, the report before you this evening is for your consideration is to award a contract for an initial 3 years with options for a further 2 years as a schedule of rates contract for the bitumen sealing of our many roads. The report is supported by a tender evaluation report, a confidential report which goes into detail about how the contractors were evaluated and makes a recommendation for you to consider tonight. As we know, here in East Gippsland, roads are really important to ourselves, our communities. We have over 3,000 kilometres of roads, of which over 1,000 kilometres are sealed roads, either asphalt or bitumen roads. So part of our maintenance program for those roads means that they are regularly resealed, and we rely on contractors to undertake that work for us. So whilst sometimes these contracts look a little dry, they're very important because they're a part of how we support the connectivity of our communities through good road infrastructure. So before you in the confidential section is a recommendation to award the contract to a contractor, and I'm happy to take any questions on the contract of a general nature. If you have any detailed questions, we would need to go into in camera because we can't discuss the actual details of the proposal because it's confidential. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Weigel. Councillors, you have a question of a general nature, Councillor Crook? Thank you. Go ahead.
Thanks, Fiona. This is obviously not cheap work. Looks like we're looking to reseal almost 100 kilometres of road. But I guess just a bit of reassurance from yourself that we're getting this service for a fair price.
Getting the service for a really fair price. When we went back and evaluated the schedule of rates compared to the current schedule, there was very little movement on it, which is really pleasing when you're thinking, we've all heard about the escalation of prices in some of our contractors and some of our contracting areas over the last little period. So we believe that this is a very fair price. When we look at the market conditions, it is a very sound price. The good thing with the schedule of rates contract is it gives council surety for the next 3 years about what those prices are going to be. So therefore we can budget with some confidence and plan with confidence into the future about how many kilometres of roads and which roads we can upgrade on an annual basis, because we know what the price will be. So the tender evaluation panel were very pleased with the rates that came in and the rates from the recommended contractor.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Crook. Are there any further questions? Councillor White, please.
I'm going to be cheeky here, Fiona. Happy to see that our roads will be maintained and possibly upgraded. Is there any chance in this contract that they could possibly forget to turn the bitumen spray off when they get to the end of the line and we get some of the gravel done at the same time?
Part of our regular program includes what we call dust suppression seals, which is exactly that, councillor. So this contract would allow for dust suppression seals, which are a single spray seal, and we've found in the last few years that they're very successful with some of our roads, but right on the edges of our towns that don't get the same sort of use as perhaps the roads right in a town centre, but have enough use to generate a need for some sort of sealing. So certainly as part of this contract we'll be able to continue with our very successful dust suppression seal program, and every year we have the opportunity to look at that budget and see if we can put a little bit more in there and get it to go a little further. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that. I'm sure there'll be many people appreciative of the effort, because it's just the fact that our Shire hasn't grown any in size, our roads haven't lengthened, but our population's increasing all the time and there's just more people on the road.
Thank you, Councillor White. Are there any further questions, councillors? If not, there is a recommendation. Sorry, Councillor Buckley. Thank you. You have a question?
Yes, Ms Weigel, just following on from Councillor White's question, will there be more evaluations in regards to those remote areas of roads that will qualify for sealing? Is that part of what this will encompass, or can you just explain briefly to me how that will take place?
So this is for our reseal. Thank you for the question, Council. This is for our resealing program predominantly, but it also gives us rates that we can use for some additional works if we wish to go that way. We also have a capital budget for roads, which we're planning to bring before council and have some further discussion about how we get more rural roads into that program. It's had a fairly strong focus in the last few years on urban roads and urban road improvements, so we recognise that this council is keen to also look at our rural roads. So we have the opportunity to either then tender those roads individually if they're large contracts, or if they're small parcels of works, to use some of the schedule of rates within this contract. So we have a couple of options open to us. I hope that answers your question.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Councillor Buckley. Any further questions, councillors? If not, you have a recommendation in front of you. Councillor Allen, you'd like to move the recommendation. Councillor White, you'd like to second the motion. Thank you. Is the motion opposed? Would you like to speak to the motion? Sorry, Councillor Allen.
No, I think it's been pretty well explained. Thanks, Mayor Mindy.
Sure. Would you like to speak to the motion, Councillor White?
Sorry, I turned it off. No, we've had good discussion during the questioning and have received advice that's music to my ears, and like the contractor is good experienced contractor and comes highly recommended. So I'm really happy that we've secured a contract for the next possibly 5 years at a very reasonable rate by comparison to other years. So I think we'll be using our ratepayers' money responsibly, and the ratepayers will see the benefit of that work.
Great, thank you, Councillor White. Is the motion opposed? Does anybody else wish to speak either for or against the motion? No? If that's the case, I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Councillor Buckley, I don't see. Oh, yes, thank you. Thank you. The motion is carried. Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you. We'll just leave that up for a moment to let people who are watching online read that. The motion that's just been passed by Council. Terrific. Then we'll go on to item 5.2 on our agenda under Business Excellence. And 5.2.1 is East Gippsland Shire Council Audit and Risk Committee Performance Review for 2020-2021. And we have the General Manager of Business Excellence, Mr. Canizzaro, to introduce this, please. Thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. Councillors, before you is a report titled the East Gippsland Shire Council Audit and Risk Committee Performance Review of 2020/21, which is seeking Council's notation that the annual performance review of the committee has been completed. The key points of the report for Council to consider are that the Audit and Risk Committee Charter requires the committee to conduct annually an evaluation of the performance of the committee against the Charter. A survey was completed by committee members, councillors who do not sit on the committee, and also senior officers. A questionnaire covered areas of the committee's operations, which included drawing out strengths and weaknesses of the committee over the past 12 months and key focus areas for the next 12 months. Also, the committee's understanding and conduct of its required duties, the appropriateness of the committee charter, the mix of skills within the committee, the conduct of meetings and administrative matters, and the professional development that's been undertaken in the past 12 months or that would be beneficial in the future with respect to the committee members. The review was also presented to councillors at a meeting on the 14th of September of 21, and to summarise, the committee has met its obligations as outlined in the Charter. It was also felt the transition to video conferencing was identified as a key highlight, as it provided greater reach to the committee and ultimately better engagement with the committee members. Also noted that there was an improvement in communication between the committee and council officers, and that was a great achievement. Also, the committee discussed the efforts to attract and retain a broader diversity of members on the committee and to demonstrate diversity for future pools of candidates on the committee. So some of the improvements for 21-22 financial year include that the committee would like to review the Audit and Risk Committee Charter, would also like to continue with the 30-minute committee members only session at pre-meetings. Also wanted to identify ways in which to appreciate and recognise staff members who prepare the volume of reports, and also a key finding was that they want to continue with the meetings conducted via video conferencing. So the report is presented for your consideration tonight, councillors. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Canizzaro. Councillors, are there any questions of Mr. Canizzaro? I see not. Then there is a recommendation in front of you. Do I have a motion that that report be noted? Thank you, Councillor Allen. You'd like to move the recommendation? Yes? Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Crook. Would you like to speak to the motion, Councillor Allen?
Thank you, Mayor Mendy. Look, in supporting this motion, I just want to thank the Audit and Risk Committee for the work that they do. And as a council representative on that committee, I really appreciate their diligence that they apply to the task, and I commend them on their willingness to continually look to improvement in the way that they do things, and as Peter said, the diversity of the committee and all those sorts of things. So in moving this motion, I just want to express my gratitude for the work that they do.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Councillor Crook, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Certainly, just briefly, thank you, Mayor. This is a very important committee. It provides a function of oversight for most of the things, if not all of the things, that council does. It's about our finances, and it's also about our probity and our transparency. So I have no hesitation in recommending the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Crook. Is the motion opposed? Does anyone else wish to speak, either for or against the motion? I think I would like to just say a few words as well, and it's completely to support what Councillor Allen and Councillor Crook have said already. This is a really important subcommittee of council. The work of council is extensive. It involves a lot of detailed work, a lot of financial transaction on behalf of the community, and it's while councillors need to take responsibility for overseeing all that work and for the results and the reporting, it's comforting to have a group of people who have been appointed to that audit and risk, who show themselves to have not only have expertise, but to fearlessly question, I think, what's presented to them. And I think they do that very well. So I would also like to congratulate them, as well as the officers who support the work of the Audit and Risk Committee. So like most tasks, this particular Audit and Risk Committee undertakes, this task of doing the annual performance review has been undertaken very thoroughly. And I think the recommendations and the changes to come out of this review are very sound and will lead to an even better functioning of that little committee. So I also support that we accept this report. So with that, I will put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. The motion is carried. Item 5.2.2 on our agenda is for the annual report 2020 to 2021. And I think the CEO is going to speak to this report, important report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, the report before you is seeking adoption of the annual report 2020-21. Under the Local Government Act 2020, councils are required to prepare an annual report in respect to each financial year. An annual report must contain a report of operations of the council, an audited performance statement, audited financial statements, and the authorised auditor's report for both. But it is more than just a report. It's a record of the success, the challenges, the highs, the lows of the year that has been. It reflects how we as an organisation have supported the community over that year. The report contains progress on implementation of the council plan, including results of strategic indicators, progress in relation to the major initiatives and service performance. This is the final annual report that will be reported against the strategic objectives of the council plan 2017 to 2021. For the next 4 years, the reporting will be against the recently adopted council plan of 2021 to 2025. Now, I don't want to steal any thunder from councillors who may wish to speak to the item, but as the CEO, there are a few things that I would just like to highlight from that year. The few of them are that council advocated for and received over $25.5 million in local economic recovery grant funding to support East Gippsland communities. And it's important to understand that that's not just an application. That requires consultation with the community, it requires detailed planning, it requires the grant applications, negotiation, and then a whole range of things that actually lead to the implementation and spending of that money, which is a big deal. Council received and responded to over 70,000 pieces of correspondence that came through the feedback at East Gippsland through our website, in addition to 15,000 letters that were sent to us. So our community are engaged with us. They want to speak to us, they want to tell us what's going on. Council won 3 awards at the 2021 LG Pro Awards for Excellence. That's only ever happened once before in the history of the awards. So it's pretty special that we won 3 in 1 year. Council provided over $500,000 in drought and agribusiness support, and often an area that doesn't get a lot of attention, but is a significant contributor to our community. And I'm sure there are many others that councillors may wish to highlight, but for me as a CEO, there were some really big ones there that I wanted to mention. Following adoption of the annual report, it will be promoted to the community through our website, social media channels. Physical copies will be made available at our customer service and libraries. A video about the annual report highlights has also been developed and will be available via Council's YouTube site and website. I have today online also Rebecca Aston, Manager of People, Performance and Culture, and Jamie Lynch, who's our Corporate Planning and Performance Officer, who can answer any technical questions. And I would like to just acknowledge the work that Jamie in particular has done to get this document done, ready and presented to you today. It's been no mean feat, and he's done a fantastic job in pulling those threads together from across the organisation. So, Mayor, the report is presented to the Council for their consideration.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mr CEO. Councillors, are there any questions, either of the CEO or of Ms Aston or Mr Lynch? No questions? Okay, then there is a recommendation in front of you that we adopt, receive and note the report. You'd like to move the recommendation, Councillor White? Yes, you'd like to second?
Questions and moving it very quickly. My hand up.
Okay, yeah. Would you like to speak to the motion?
Seconder.
Yeah, Councillor Rees.
Actually, I would, because as Anthony has just described, there are so many great achievements. I'll only speak to 2 of these because they're very close to me. We'll start with perhaps the lesser, which was the inauguration, I would call it, of the Agricultural Sector Advisory Committee, which this council has never had before. I'm very proud to be one of the councillors, along with the Mayor, on this committee. It's early days, but they will do great work because it's introducing a very large sector of our economy to council to assist us to even do better. But the other one that caught my eye, or I knew of anyway, was the money that's gone to small business owners, which we trudged many miles and got sore-footed, but remained determined and not to give up because they were being overlooked in the context of the bushfires, and it is fantastic that we, through perseverance, have actually managed, and it says here 4,000 small businesses. That's tremendous because they were just going to be left out in the cold, and as I say, a lot of hard work, a lot of perseverance, but congratulations to the staff for administering this, and good wishes to all the businesses that received those funds.
Thank you, Councillor White. Councillor Rees, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Well, councillors and CEO in particular, I just want to congratulate you and this council and the previous council for the work that you've done, which is documented in this annual report. It's easy to get a little bit misty-eyed or perhaps blurry-eyed on the figures and the statutory reporting requirements in a document like this. It's extensive and there are pages and pages of facts and figures which we're required to report on. But I think the main thing for me about an annual report is the snapshot in time of our community. And it tells a story of our people. And it tells a story at the moment of our previous mayor and our current mayor and the transition through the election this year, and relatively seamless in that we have a council that is functioning and beautifully demonstrated through that annual report. That's where we are at now with that election, the transition from mayor to mayor, council to council. So I want to congratulate the councillors and the previous council for the work that they've done, because that is demonstrated in this annual report. But councillors, in 100 years' time or 200 years' time, this is going to be one of those documents that people look back on and ask, what happened in 2019, 2021? It was a big year or a big couple of years. And I think that this annual report doesn't hide from the fact that it was a big year. There were challenges and travails and difficulties. And it tells a human story in our community, and it's just beautifully told. And I think it's really beautifully told, and we should acknowledge Jamie and Rebecca and the graphics team who have been responsible, because the front end of this report is just so accessible and so visual and gives the indication of the story of our community so beautifully that I just really want to congratulate them for doing that and providing that front-end accessible snapshot of our community, to our community, of the last years for the future. So I really acknowledge that and thank the graphics team and the designers for actually pulling that information into a beautiful and really colourful and visual representation. The report also mentions, and it probably glosses over, but it also mentions that the Local Government Act 2020 came into effect. And one of the things that came out of that was deliberative engagement for the new council plan. And that's a significant change. And in my 3 terms, it was such a positive and excellent change in the way we go about developing a council plan, starting at a community level with advisory committees and really a ground up approach. And that's documented in this report as well. And I really just think that's a great starting point. And I look forward, you've set the bar very high, council officers, for the next few years of council reports.
Thank you, Councillor Reeves. Is the motion opposed? Does anybody else wish to speak either for or against the motion? I'd like to add a few words too, even though a lot has been covered already. I think this is such an important document. I suppose any organisation loves to see the last 12 months of their work written into a document, that you can look back on and reflect on and make some sort of a judgment about how well you've done. And the annual report gives an opportunity to, really highlight some of the excellent work that's been done. So I've enjoyed reading it, and I really hope that members of the community enjoy reading it as well, because as Councillor Reeves said, I think it's a very accessible document. The way it's been presented is really inviting. I had a number of highlights too, which were, I think, when I thought about the theme of the last 12 months, it's really about supporting communities to me. And the community recovery committees, and we've heard from some of the place-based managers this evening about the work that they did and continue to do in the recovery and phase of in our many communities that were impacted by the terrible bushfires, and that work of course continues but is interrupted by other challenges. But supporting communities, I think, is something that this council and our officers have developed a lot of expertise in, particularly in learning what community-led recovery actually means. I think we've been challenged in that, and I think we've learnt a lot about it along the way. But tremendous work in bushfire recovery has been done. And that includes the infrastructure, but it also includes supporting programs to strengthen and increase resilience in our communities. The CEO mentioned the level of advocacy that's been done to receive all that funding from state and federal levels. That's been an incredible highlight, I think, over the last 12 months. But then the challenges. So COVID-19, of course, has affected our community through the whole period of this that this report covers. What that means to our communities is obviously a very disrupted period, but as we've learnt in the bushfire and the bushfire recovery period, it also affects our staff as well, and how our organisation has been impacted by those disruptions of changed working conditions, changing to working from home, and so on, have been enormous, I'm sure. So to have been able to achieve these things that are documented in this report, despite the challenges, I think is the extraordinary story that's told in this annual report. Of course, there's a whole section on the financials, and I think that's a really, that's a good story in this report as well, and I congratulate the people in our finance department for those results. So I just want to sort of finish off by just saying that I think it's a remarkable year, as Councillor Reeves has sort of indicated. All the hard work and achievements from the CEO, the executive team, managers, and every person who dons the council logo and agrees to council's codes and values and signs on to work so hard for our communities, I think needs to be congratulated, and I hope that that will be passed on to everybody. Of course, there's always more work to do in local government, but the other thing that I'm always proud of with this council is that people are so willing to see and recognise where improvements need to be made and to show a willingness to continually improve. I would like to also recognise the previous council, because of course this report does cover the previous council, and it's great to have two representatives from that council here tonight. So well done to you for all the decisions and hard work that you contributed to this period of 12 months, and to my current council colleagues. I hope you also enjoy reading this report, and I hope you'll encourage others in the community to read it too and share in the amazing story that it tells. So thank you very much. That's great. And so I think we might put that motion to the vote. So all those in favour of the motion on the table? Thank you. The motion is carried. Item 5.2.3 on our agenda is the Mutual Respect Charter, and we have Mr Canizzaro to present this item. Thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. Councillors, tonight before you is a report titled the Mutual Respect Charter, and the report is seeking council approval and adoption of the draft Mutual Respect Charter, and you can find a copy of that at attachment 1. The key points with respect to the Mutual Respect Charter are as follows. East Gippsland Shire Council is committed to being accessible and being responsive to our community and members of the public. And we value respectful relationships with our community and our customers. Notwithstanding, Council has a zero tolerance in relation to any harm, abuse, aggressive behaviour or threats directed towards Council or its officers. So the draft Mutual Respect Charter has been developed to support a key principle of providing a safe and respectful workplace. It is based on the principle of mutual respect and cooperation between us and the community. So whilst council officers deal with unacceptable behaviour in a professional manner, the abuse can affect council's ability to do its work and perform its functions in the most effective manner. And also officers do take on that abuse and have that sort of vicarious issue that they take on board. So that potentially can impact on the health and safety and security of our officers. So the Mutual Respect Charter sets out a shared responsibility for a safe workplace expectations for our staff in dealing with our community and our customers, and also our commitment to serving the community and what people can expect when interacting with council and its officers. Mayor, the report is presented to you tonight for your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Cannizzaro. Councillors, are there any questions of Mr Cannizzaro about this item? Councillor Crook, please.
Thanks, Mr Cannizzaro. I just wonder how common these documents are within local government. It seems, I would hope that these types of behaviours are taken for granted, but obviously in some circumstances we need to spell out what the expectations are, both of ourselves and the people that we deal with. Is it common for councils to do this in such a formalised way?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Crook. Certainly, I must acknowledge the City of Stonington, who have been very kind in permitting us to use their Mutual Respect Charter and adopt it and edit it to suit East Gippsland Shire Council. So there are some councils that have a mutual respect type of charter. In addition to that, I might add that this is very well aligned with the WorkSafe ads that you might be seeing on TV with respect to abusive behaviour that constitute a aggressive, abusive, intimidating behaviour, and one that obviously WorkSafe is very passionate about in terms of stamping out. So there's some alignment there, Councillor Crook.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Crook. Councillor Reeves.
Thanks, Mayor. Mr Cannizzaro, have we seen an increase in incidents of abuse or disrespect towards our staff in the period that we might describe as the emergency period since the Black Summer fires and COVID?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Reeves. Yes, we have. So I think it's wider spread in terms of from Parks and Gardens crew, landfill operators, to our contact centre, and including our front of house service centres at the counters. So there is an increase, but I think more importantly it's broader and more widespread.
Thank you. Councillor Van Diekel, please.
I'm just curious, how does this actually get enforced, or how do we action this? I mean, does a council officer, when they're potentially being abused, pull out the charter and say, like, these are the rules? Like, how do we actually ensure that community know about this? And because I feel like if a Parks and Gardens person was getting abused, which unfortunately I know people in Parks and Gardens, and it actually does happen very often, so it's very unfortunate. But having a charter doesn't necessarily mean, I mean, I'm all for it, but it doesn't necessarily mean people are going to stop. So how is this enforced?
Sure. Thank you for your question, Councillor Van Diekel. So first and foremost, we want to promote it throughout our customer-facing frontline areas and staff. So we'll have posters and those, that collateral. We'll also put it on our website, our intranet, so that accessible to our council officers. Also socials. So we're going to promote it in terms of our commitment in terms of a cooperative, mutual respect manner in which we deal with customers and the community. We're also in the back end have a customer complaints management system in terms of how officers are guided in terms of what to do with intimidating, aggressive, abusive behaviour. And that is a policy that is widely known by council officers, and we have refresher sessions on the customer handling management community complaints handling policy and procedure on a regular basis. So staff are well versed in what to do with respect to aggressive, intimidating behaviour, and on occasion, we will need to assess whether we call the police in certain cases.
Thank you. Councillor White, you had a question, please, and then Councillor Greeson. Thank you.
Mr Cannizzaro, I've opened here on page 201, and I see that it also has a heading here that the community has the right and responsibility to dot points be treated with courtesy and respect. So how will council deal with it going in reverse? If you actually have officers that perhaps lose the plot under pressure or something like that, so you've obviously, you're looking at both sides of the equation?
Certainly. Thank you for your question, Councillor White. That's absolutely right, and hence the terminology mutual respect charter. So if we're expecting to be treated in a manner that you would expect to be treated, then we want to do exactly the same with our customers and our community. So certainly if there are incidences where officers fall into, being disrespectful or discourteous or those sorts of things, and certainly we're made aware of it, we will deal with that within our own human resources management process and procedure, and potentially disciplinary procedure and action.
Thank you. Councillor Greason, you had a question?
Thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Greason, could you speak into the microphone directly? You're very quiet. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr Cannizzaro, in the event that a member of the community observes inappropriate or aggressive behaviour towards a council employee, is there a way in which they can report it?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Greason. Yes, so our normal channels are available, so that could be a call into our contact centre, or reported in person at our customer service centres, or through our governance team that would record that, and we would note the incident and understand it, assess it, and take some action.
Thank you, Councillor Greason. Councillors, are there any further questions? If not, there is a recommendation in front of you. Do I have a motion, please? Councillor Crook, thank you. Councillor Allen, seconded. Thank you. Councillor Crook, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Look, I think this is important, councillors. In plain terms, it sets out our expectations about how we would like to be treated, and how our customers and the community can expect to be treated in return. As it suggests, it is about mutual respect, which I believe is fundamental in a democracy like ours, and if we can't show each other respect, then something's wrong. So I think this is a really welcomed move, because it really spells out in quite plain terms what our expectations are of the community and what the community can in return expect from us. So I have no hesitation in recommending the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Crook. Councillor Allen, please.
Thank you, Mayor Mendy. The old adage, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, comes to mind when I read this. And unfortunately, some people, fortunately only a small minority, but some people believe that it's their right to be abusive to who they see as public servants or councillors or anyone else that won't bend to their will or do what they want. And I'm very, very pleased to see that council has taken the step of introducing this charter, because abusive, aggressive behaviour is never acceptable, and everyone should be treated with respect and treat others with respect, which is what this charter sets out. So I commend it to my fellow councillors and thank the council staff who have developed it.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Is the motion opposed? Does anyone else wish to speak either for or against the motion? Yes, Councillor White, please, and then Councillor Reeves.
Thank you. I take this just another step to say that people turn up to work and do their job, i.e. council employees, but at the end of the day, they go home and they live in your street. They're part of your community. Their kids play sport. They might play soccer or football or whatever. So I look at this as basically saying, you know, they are part, when they go home, they are absolutely part of our community and should be treated as such.
Thank you, Councillor White. Councillor Reeves, thank you.
It's a very important document to have, and you know the basis of contemporary society is based around rights and responsibilities, and it really clearly sets that out. My question to Mr Cannizzaro about the increase in incidents is not without importance. I mean, we know from the work that Rob Gordon has done on bushfire affected and post-traumatic communities that often a lot of the behaviours we see are born out of anxiety, and anxiety is a product of threat and uncertainty, and we've got plenty of that in our community at the moment. So I think that whatever we can do to help reduce that uncertainty through the work that we do as council and to bring stability to our community will help reduce that anxiety, and that's another way forward in terms of being able to address some of these behaviours. So while it's fantastic to have this, I think we also need to recognise that there is a lot of anxiety and a lot of trauma in our community that drives this behaviour. Doesn't make it acceptable, but I think that it also, this document actually makes it clearer and easier for us to identify it and perhaps help those people whose behaviours seem to be in this manner and threatening our staff.
Thank you, Councillor Reeves. Does anyone else wish to speak either for or against the motion? If not, I'll put that motion to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. The motion is carried. Item 5.2.4 is about a public transparency policy. And again, we have Mr Cannizzaro to present this. Thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. Councillors, tonight you have before you a report titled the Public Transparency Policy, which is seeking adoption of the revised draft policy. Given that we've been roughly about 12 months into the new Local Government Act 2020, it's an opportune time to have reviewed the Public Transparency Policy. So the key points of the report, councillors, for you to consider tonight. Firstly, the Local Government Act 2020 requires council to have and maintain a public transparency policy. Secondly, council adopted the first public transparency policy back in August 2020, but we also committed to review the policy within 12 months to incorporate any key learnings and enable any updates to reflect the legislative changes that were brought upon by the Local Government Act 2020. The policy commits council to making all council decision-making processes transparent and council information publicly available, except where it's confidential, as defined by the Act or by virtue of any other Act, or it is not in the public interest to make it available. It further provides that where possible, council information will be available on the website or accessible at customer service centres and libraries. Also, the review of the policy has provided the opportunity to remove the requirements where there have been legislative changes that have either been replaced or repealed. So some administrative changes with respect to the policy. The major changes in the policy have been structural in nature, which provide an improved level of clarity around what information is available under the Local Government Act and what is available under other acts administered by council. You'll be able to see those changes on page 211 of the council agenda. In addition, the policy provides improved procedural guidance for the community, accessing information that is not available on the website or otherwise available. And you'll be able to see those documented on page 213 of your agenda. Also present today is the Acting Manager of Governance, Patricia Clive, who is available to respond to any technical questions you may have, councillors. I present the report to you tonight, councillors. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Cannizzaro. Councillor Crook, you have a question?
Yes, thanks, Mr Cannizzaro, and I'm not sure if it's a question for you or for Patricia. I was interested to hear there that in this transparency policy there are a number of things that or a number of circumstances under which council won't disclose information. Now, I understand that they may be commercial in confidence, you know, the price of tenders and that kind of thing, but you also mentioned if not deemed in the public interest. And I just wonder if there are set criteria derived from the state or the federal government around what is deemed to be in the public interest or not, because that sounds to me like a bit of a get-out-of-jail-free card, and I'm just wondering how that particular clause is governed.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Crook. I think Patricia Clive is ready to respond.
Okay, am I working?
Yes,
Thank you.
you are.
Thank you for the question, Councillor. You'll see in the definitions section of the document, there is a explanation of what the public interest test is. Now, some of the things that may fall into those areas are things that may be a public health matter or a safety matter. So it can be quite a tricky situation to understand, but we've made sure that it's available for the public to at least be able to look through that definition.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Crook. Councillors, are there any other further questions? Councillor Reeves, please.
Just a question out of interest, and noting the marked up copy there, Patricia, and thank you for providing that as well. Do we get many requests for information from culturally and linguistically diverse communities for our information?
Thanks for the question, Councillor Reeves. I'm not aware of that specifically. I'm sure that if we did, we would make efforts to make sure that they were able to access the information they needed.
Yeah, right. Sure.
Thank you. Councillor Buckley, you have a question?
Oh, yes, thank you. Mr. Cannizzaro, is there any reason why, in regards to this public transparency policy, that we couldn't now be able to allow the public to view our briefing sessions?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Buckley. That is not incorporated into this public transparency document, as you're aware, and that is I think a discussion or a decision that would need to be made by the councillors to make a decision on that.
So there's nothing in this policy that would prevent that, or that's just a matter of a council decision?
That's correct, Councillor Buckley, that this policy doesn't convey or communicate anything around councillor briefing sessions, and as I said, councillors would need to decide on whether that would be appropriate or otherwise.
Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. Are there any further questions? If not, there is an officer's recommendation in front of you. Do I have a motion, please? Thank you, Councillor Greason. You'd like to move the recommendation? Yes.
Yes, I wish to move the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Crook. To be the seconder, Councillor Greason, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Having an actual policy on transparency is really very important for us, I think. We've got a bit of a history in the past of a fair percentage of our council meetings not being public. I think that's changed quite a lot, and there's very little of our council meetings that are not now public. And I think that's, our new council plan vision statement talks about putting community at the centre of council decision making, and I think that this transparency policy backs that up very strongly. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Greason. Councillor Crook, would you like to speak to the motion?
Certainly, thank you. Transparency and accountability, they're pretty important things. And for a local government institution, spending tens of millions of dollars of ratepayers, taxpayers' money, it's absolutely essential that we provide a mechanism to ensure that we are open and transparent in the decisions that we make and the actions that we take. So I'm happy to see this motion passed.
Thank you, Councillor Crook. Is the motion opposed? Does anyone else wish to speak either for or against the motion? Councillor Buckley.
Yeah, look, I tend to agree with Councillor Crook. We have had a reputation of being the most secretive council in the state, and I think that this will go some ways to rectifying that. But I don't think it goes far enough. I think that if we can open up our discussions in our briefings to public scrutiny, I think that in itself would really possibly it might throw a cat amongst the pigeons, but it certainly would allow people to feel that they are part of what is a very important system and that we would offer our best face forward. So that's just a support of this motion.
Support of the motion. Thank you, Councillor Buckley. Does anyone else wish to speak either for or against the motion? Councillor White. Thank you.
I wasn't sure that throwing a cat amongst the pigeons is perhaps the right word, but it would send a very good message to the public if we could open up and be even more transparent. I think that would be a great move forward, but as I understand from what Mr Canizzaro has spoken, it needs to be a motion and a decision of council to do that, but I'd be keen to see that going forward.
Are you speaking for the motion, Councillor White? I just need to know, so...
I think you probably would have got the gist that I was speaking for the motion, yes.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to clarify so I could offer the right of reply to the mover of the motion. Okay, does anyone else wish to speak for or against the motion? If not, I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. The motion is carried. Item 5.2.5 is the instrument of delegation to the Chief Executive Officer. Mr Canizzaro, thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. Councillors, tonight before you is a report titled Instrument of Delegation to the Chief Executive Officer. We're just seeking your adoption to that instrument. The key points of the report for you to consider tonight, councillors, is that the instrument of delegation enables the Chief Executive Officer to perform powers, functions and duties on behalf of council. It is also necessary to remake the instrument on occasion to capture any legislative changes that have occurred since the instrument was last made. In this case, it was June 2020. Also, the instrument provides for the maximum monetary limit for expenditure by the Chief Executive Officer, which is currently $500,000 including GST. Currently, the instrument allows the Chief Executive Officer to exceed this limit for the procurement of insurance as required under legislation. However, there is no maximum limit established for this purpose. The proposed instrument before you tonight seeks to be in line with Section 11, subsection 5 of the Act, in which to specify a maximum monetary limit where council's expenditure is required by legislation but exceeds the Chief Executive Officer's current financial delegation limit of $500,000 including GST. So therefore it's proposed to specify in the instrument the maximum monetary limit for the Chief Executive Officer for any legislated expenditure such as insurance. And the proposed financial delegation for that type of expenditure, we're proposing at $1.1 million, including GST. Given the propensity for insurances to increase approximately 10% per annum on an ongoing basis, last year, councillors, the premium increase was 12%. Over the next 3 years, we expect the premiums to grow to around that $1.1 million, hence the proposal to increase the Chief Executive Officer's current financial delegation for the purchase of insurance and any legislative type arrangements to $1.1 million. So that, in a sense, councillors, places a cap on expenditure that the Chief Executive Officer has with respect to any purchase of insurance. It does not affect the Chief Executive Officer's current financial delegation of $500,000, including GST, for the purchases or procurement of goods and services or the signing of contracts up to $500,000. So in effect, this is purely for instances where premiums, the insurance premiums are at that higher end, and we want to cap it at $1.1 million, including GST. Councillors, with me tonight is Patricia Clive, Acting Manager of Governance, who is here, that is available also to answer any questions you may have. The report is presented to you tonight, councillors, for your consideration. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Cannizzaro. Councillor Stowe, you have a question, please?
Yes, thank you. Peter, could I ask you how often this discretionary limit will be used in a year? Is it just once or twice or more often than that? And could I ask you also, when it is used, if that item is reported immediately to council following the decision?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Stowe. Certainly, insurances happen on a yearly basis, so to reach that limit, we would expect 1 or 2 per annum items being invoiced around that level. And you'll note in the proposal that the delegation is for that $1.1 million, inclusive of GST, but the Chief Executive Officer must report to the councillors that the Chief Executive Officer has expended that money on whatever particular insurance it might be. So it might be work care, it might be other insurances, professional indemnity, those sorts of things. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stowe. Another couple of questions from Councillor Crook and then Councillor Buckley, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Just some clarity. So this $1 million is a lot of money. This delegation would be restricted to those particular items and not available to other things. Is that the case?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Crook. Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Buckley, please.
My question is it standard procedure for CEOs to sign off on that kind of money before presenting to council after the fact, or would it be procedure in other councils to present that to the council for discussion prior to signing off on it?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Buckley. So, firstly, the Chief Executive Officer has that ability under the procurement policy to procure insurance in any case without a delegation, and also is required to report to councillors that a purchase of insurance premiums have been made. So it's response to your first question. With respect to your second question, we have not done a benchmark across other councils in terms of their requirements around any of the legislative or statutory procurement requirements, particularly around insurance. So we've not done that benchmark, so I can't respond to you on that one.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. Councillor White, please.
I've got 2 questions. One is that this is absolutely only for legislative requirements and no other procurement in that size, that range of money. And the other question would be that I guess during the process of a year that these items would probably appear before the Audit and Risk Committee as part of Council's monetary policy or auditing of our expenditure.
Sorry, what was your first question? Sorry, Councillor White, I missed that one.
Gee, I had to repeat myself the other day too.
Yes, so yes. So the answer is yes to that first one, yes. And secondly, with respect to those purchases, that are at that, $1.1 million or below that. There are certainly levels of control within the organisation that when the premiums come to council, they are vetted by governance, our insurance team and governance. Also, the manager finance will look at those in terms of authority to pay as well. It comes to me before it goes to the Chief Executive Officer, and I recommend to the Chief Executive Officer with respect to it has passed all of the control stages that we have internally, and then that would be recommended to the CEO for his final authority or approval. Certainly the other controls in place are internal audit, and certainly external audits may look at levels of higher levels of values with respect to expenditure.
Thank you. Councillor Greason, please.
Thank you. Mr Cannizzaro, can you please just confirm, I mean, having answered everyone else's questions and making it quite clear, I think, but that this is really just an efficiency measure. It means that the CEO can make payments when they arise rather than having to wait until they come back to council for things that we would have no choice but to pay anyway, the insurance as such. So there's that one, but also, and just to clarify also, that it does not in any way change the CEO's current limit and requirement to seek approval for any other expenditure over $500,000. Thank you.
Thank you for your questions, Councillor Greason. Yes and yes.
Terrific. Okay, thank you. Councillor Reeves, please.
I like a brief answer. So my question hopefully gets a brief answer as well. So reading the marked up version and understanding and remembering the previous delegation didn't have any limit. So this is actually putting in place much more stringent and stricter controls and transparency, because it actually places a limit where prior there was no limit. On the statutory purchase delegations, they could have been 2 million, 3 million, and that would have been okay. Now this is placing a limit on it. Yes.
That's correct.
Terrific. Councillor Greason, your hand is up, but I think that was from a previous question, right? Okay, terrific. Councillors, are there any further questions? If not, there is a recommendation in front of you. Thank you, Councillor Reeves. Moving the motion, seconding Councillor Stowe. Thank you. Would you like to speak to the motion, Councillor Reeves?
I think that the rationale and the reasons and the understanding of this has been teased out in that question and answer time. And I'd just like to also acknowledge the CEO. Thank you for bringing this to us to put these controls in place. I think that's really important.
Thank you, Councillor Reeves. Councillor Stowe, thank you.
Just to endorse Mark's comments, I think it's a sensible arrangement and largely procedural. Fully endorse it.
Thank you, Councillor Stowe. Is the motion opposed? Does anybody else wish to speak for or against the motion? If not, I'll put that motion to the vote. All those in favour? Councillor Buckley, I don't see your hand, but that's intentional, I assume. Okay, thank you. The motion is carried. Sorry. Oh, that's a good idea. But I think everybody did show. Anyway, all right, perhaps I'll do that. Thank you, just to be clear. All those against, please. No, the motion is carried. Thank you. Item 5.3, under place and community, we have a planning permit.
Madam Mayor, I'll be leaving the chambers, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. We'll let you know when we move on to the next item. Thank you. Yep. Item 5.3.1 is for planning permit application 475/2020P for 30 Clifton West Road for a multi-lot subdivision roadworks and vegetation removal. And we have the Acting General Manager, Place and Community, Mr. Chris Wayne, to present this item, please.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. Councillors, before you is a report regarding planning permit application 475/2020 for a multi-lot subdivision, roadworks and removal of vegetation at 30 Clifton West Road, Wyong, where the officer recommendation is to issue a notice of decision to grant a permit application. Some key points of consideration within the report is that the application was made subject to public notification via letters and 32 objections were received. Officers consider the proposal to create lots of approximately 4,000 square metres and larger is consistent with the low density residential zone and can be adequately serviced with on-site wastewater management systems. Neighbourhood character has been assessed in consideration of the planning scheme controls, which apply to subject land and the low density residential zone. Adjacent land has been subdivided with a similar dwelling development and density, thus has similar neighbourhood character. Officers hold the view that drainage concerns which were tested at VCAT have been resolved satisfactorily through the amended drainage strategy. Councillors, I'd like to bring to your attention that you have also been advised earlier of a revised set of conditions that has been circulated and now replaces attachment 1 to the report that was in the agenda. The revisions included in condition 3 imposes obligations on a range of matters, including waterway management plan, wastewater disposal, building envelopes, fencing and vehicle access. This is now to be demonstrated on the screen for viewing. Also present online this evening is Manager of Planning Martin Richardson, Statutory Planning Coordinator Robert Pringle, and M&A Meston, Acting Senior Land Use Planner, for any technical questions associated with this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Wayne. Councillors, are there any questions, please? Councillor Stowe?
Robert, could I just ask you a question in regard to the septic tank situation there? Could I ask two questions? One is why the septic tanks rather than sewerage? And secondly, is there any requirements for those septic tanks to be serviced over a period of time?
Thank you, Councillor Stowe, and through you, Madam Mayor. There is a requirement or an ability for a low-density residential zone land to be provided with on-site wastewater disposal. That is an option that's available through the planning scheme controls. East Gippsland Water does not currently service the area, and the headworks charges that would be required in order to sewer this entire area would be quite significant. I'll say that this area has been zoned as low-density residential going back into the Bairnsdale Shire days. What typically might have happened if this land wasn't currently zoned for that purpose is that in a precinct structure plan, we may have considered that headworks and applied a development contributions plan, which would have distributed the costs to all developers in that area. Going now, when the land is zoned for a significant period of time to a sewer system, when it's been demonstrated in the application that the land can accommodate on-site wastewater disposal, is just a bit much for the applicants. And the zone would also provide that if they were to provide sewerage, that the density could be increased. So the low density residential zone provides that we could go from 4,000 square metre minimum allotments down to 2,000 square metre minimum allotments. Overall, our recommendation is based on the fact that this density that is being proposed is the best possible outcome for a range of considerations, both for neighbourhood character, environmental constraints, the stormwater pressures and drainage, and also that the land can accommodate that on-site wastewater treatment.
Thank you, councillor Stowe. Did you have a further question?
The ongoing servicing of the septic tank system.
Thank you, councillor. So there isn't necessarily a requirement in the planning process to require on-site ongoing maintenance. However, that is an inherent aspect of maintaining an on-site wastewater disposal system. It would be our officer recommendation that we work with our environmental health team to more broadly raise awareness of individual landowners' requirements to manage their septic systems in our low density rural living and farming zone areas of the Shire. So that is a potential for us to do a public education campaign, and I'm certain that there would be resources available through the Environmental Protection Authority to help us go through that process and not have to expend an exorbitant amount of money. But the recommendation as now put with condition 3 will at least put a notification on title alerting people to the fact that when they're purchasing these properties that there is an on-site wastewater treatment system either required to be constructed or to be maintained. And if they're unfamiliar with those systems, that will at least be a notification that they need to investigate what they would need to do to keep that system running efficiently.
Thanks, Robert. Can I just say one last thing? Are you confident that the modern septic tank system will adequately be adequate for this development and won't cause any ongoing issues?
I'm confident that the ongoing use of on-site sewerage systems in this location has been demonstrated to be sufficient. The technical experts that have reviewed the application and prepared the application provide confidence to that decision. We cannot guarantee that there will be no failed systems. There is always an inherent risk in any sewerage management system, including a reticulated sewer. If a reticulated sewer gets overloaded with rainwater, for example, we might have to have environmental discharges in those management systems as well. So we're confident that the systems that will need to be installed will be checked. Our environmental health team will check the proposals for each individual system that's installed, and there's an ongoing compliance checking, and if there are reports of systems failing, our environmental health team will also be able to review and give advice to the owners on how to rectify the situation.
Thank you, councillor Stowe. Councillors, are there further questions? Councillor White, please.
Thank you. Robert, I guess because reading your recommendations, it's not recommended for sewer, but the hypothetical here is that, as you've said before, that if it was sewered, there would be the possibility of doubling the number of allotments, and in terms of that zone at the moment, there are quite a number of other properties that will be doing similar things, and I'm just noting that quite a few of the objectors have mentioned traffic movement and the increase. So I'm thinking that your recommendation is the right one, because otherwise we would probably expose the road system to volumes of traffic that it's not capable of handling. Would you agree?
Thank you, Councillor, and through you, Madam Mayor. We wouldn't suggest that it would be a pure doubling of the number of lots based on some of the other environmental constraints of the site. But if we were to go down the course of discussing sewering the proposal, it would represent a substantive change to the proposal, and wouldn't necessarily be approvable in its current form, because it would then give rise to further amendments being proposed, or further changes which would increase the density, which would increase the traffic requirements. Department of Transport would want to see it again. It would need a new social impact assessment because the demand on services would increase. It would effectively be a back to the drawing board for the applicant, because that would substantially change what their costs would be, and it would also substantially change what their cost recovery would be, which would be trying to get the most yield out of that land.
Thank you, Councillor White. Councillors, are there any further questions? Councillor Van Diegel.
I just have a question regarding the traffic, because I think that the most objections discuss traffic, especially into Bullimore Road and the intersection. So is there a proposal that that intersection will be changed? I mean, a lot of the subdivisions and streets off Bullimore Road already, I think the intersections are really unsafe. So you're looking at a lot more cars, and the biggest complaints is really only 2 ways into town. So will the roads be able to cope? And I guess, yeah, the intersection I think is quite important to take into consideration. So is there any plans for that at the moment, Robert?
Thank you, Councillor, and through you, Madam Mayor. The application was referred to Department of Transport, who imposed conditions that are listed on our proposed recommendation. Those conditions speak to the need for an intersection design at Clifton West Road and Bullimore Road to be provided before the issue of statement of compliance for stage 1 of the development, and for the construction of that improved intersection to occur before the implementation of stage 2, or the statement of compliance for stage 2. So that is upfront, before we get more than, say, 60 to 70 lots, I believe, out of that 203, we would see the intersection being upgraded and into a more safer standard to Department of Transport requirements. What this doesn't address, and the concerns will continue to be raised, is the down the road impacts on intersections such as the Howard Avenue and Bullimore Road intersection, and further on, at the bottom of Ford's Hill, and going in along Riverine Street into the CBD. We think that it's reasonable, the conditions that Department of Transport have imposed on this intersection in particular. And again, had we gone back 30 years and not had this land zoned as it is now, we might have had some forward planning and, again, development contributions towards the various intersection upgrades that would support this. Instead, we have to continue to lobby Department of Transport to prioritise these upgrades. Where we can, we'll get developer contributions, but where we've missed the boat because of 30, 40 years ago, the land being rezoned for these purposes, we just have to bear it for a little bit of time until the demand is there and we get those upgrades happening with Department of Transport participating in those upgrades.
Thank you, Councillor Van Diegel. Councillors, are there any further questions? Councillor Crook.
Thanks, Robert. I understand this development's in total about 208 lots, roughly equivalent to the size of Bruthen. I'm not quite sure how many were in Eastwood, but this is obviously one of the most significant developments we've seen in recent times. I know previously the development has been before this council and subsequently ended up in the Victorian Civil Administrative Tribunal courtroom and was rejected at that stage because of concerns around waterway management. Is it the case now that those concerns have in fact been addressed? And I recall reading that the development of the waterway management plan actually didn't have to happen prior to the approval here tonight, and that was actually going to happen afterwards. Is that the case?
Thank you, Councillor, and through you, Madam Mayor. To answer your last question first, Councillor, yes, it is typical that ongoing conditions such as preparation of a waterway management plan or a detailed drainage plan or other detailed plans will typically come after a planning permit is granted. And that is because we want to be certain that the planning permit is granted. The supporting information that's been provided to officers and has been referred internally to our technical officer and externally to the likes of Catchment Management Authority have been reviewed, and we are confident that this will work, and we're confident that it would stand up if tested again at VCAT. We can only be as confident as we can be, and obviously if the objectors are still aggrieved by the determination that council makes, they can appeal that determination. We feel like the applicant has done their due diligence in remaking this application and has met the concerns of the VCAT member through that determination. So again, we're confident and we're hopeful that the objectors will also see that we have that confidence. But if they want to test it, that is their right.
Thank you. Thank you for that question and the response. Any further questions, councillors? If not, there is an officer's recommendation in front of you. Councillor Stowe, you'd like?
Yes, I'd like to move that the officer's recommendation be accepted, please.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor White. Would you like to speak to the motion, Councillor Stowe?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Look, this has been tested through VCAT previously and found wanting in areas that have now been rectified. We've been assured by the staff they have been. Drainage has been an issue. I note that the assets are now serviced by oversized overflows to catch the water. Also, each allotment's required to have a 5,000 litre tank, which is to be used for toilets, garden, laundry, etc., which again will take the pressure off the runoff. The subdivision's been supported by all the local referral agencies. The blocks are of a large size. They're almost 6,000 square metres. These will be premier blocks. Last time we met, we discussed the jewel in the crown down at Meetung, which Mark pointed out. I believe these can be the jewel in the crown in Bairnsdale. They're magnificent blocks. They've got views of the Gippsland Lake, some of them. They've got views of Mount Taylor. They've got views of the bushland. And they're only about 3 kilometres from the central business district. The area itself has been zoned for residential for many years now, and I can see this enhancing the town of Bairnsdale, the city of Bairnsdale, and I know that there's a lot of interest and a lot of people queuing up ready to buy these blocks, so I have no hesitation in recommending it to the council.
Thank you, Councillor Stowe. Councillor White, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, as has been discussed, this has actually been before council, the last council, and was passed, and then the objectors took it to VCAT on the premise of the drainage issues. So it was sent back by VCAT to the proponent and to the planners to work on that part of the subdivision, which has been done, and I read additional things also to enhance the subdivision have also been done. So I think that the proponent has done what was required of him, and I guess the outcome will be determined in a minute or two, but that's why I'm seconding this motion, in that the proponent has done all that was asked of him in order to make this subdivision an even better subdivision. And as Councillor Stowe has rightly pointed out, it's a premier site. The other subdivisions out in that region have all gone very well in recent times, and it's just another opportunity for our region to actually have land available for people who wish to come and live here, which is something that we've been talking about for months. Availability of land for people who wish to move to East Gippsland, or people who wish to get out of town from actually the CBD type residential to a little bit of space. Perhaps they're just, what would you call it, their Shangri-La, as they develop those properties and their gardens and everything that goes with that. So, yeah, I would support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor White. Is the motion opposed? Does it, Councillor Greason? I think you're, yes, Councillor Greason, you'd like to speak against the motion?
Yes, Mayor. I do wish to speak against the motion. I, in theory, support this development. It is in a recognised and accepted Bairnsdale growth area. However, I want to quote from the Victorian Auditor General's Office Audit 2018 on managing environmental impacts of wastewater. This was an audit of 2 large suburbs of Melbourne that years ago were not sewered when they were being developed. So it goes, in the 1950s, metropolitan Melbourne grew rapidly, and in particularly in eastern and southern suburbs, but the provision of sewerage infrastructure did not keep up. Therefore, councils approved the use of on-site wastewater treatment systems and to manage wastewater and allow the developments to proceed. A significant number of these properties are found in the Mornington Peninsula and in the Yarra Ranges. Today, South East Water and Yarra Valley Water run 2 metropolitan backlog programs. The audit made a raft of recommendations for DELP and the EPA, for the Mornington Peninsula Shire Council, the Yarra Ranges Council, and for the Yarra Valley Water. The audit shows that individual and cumulative risks and impacts from on-site systems that are performing poorly are still not adequately managed. These were considered to be high-risk unsewered townships. Now, we're in 2021. We're not in the 1950s. We are growing rapidly. And the East Gippsland Shire Council, I think, needs policy that strongly encourages new developments to be sewered and to advocate to East Gippsland Water to expand their areas of service and require that all new developments are fully sewered. I think East Gippsland needs to grow. It is growing, but it needs to grow with full services to communities, road networks that allow efficient, safe connectivity, reserves and family outdoor spaces, public transport, confidence in the safety of systems established. This development has housing sites on steep slopes that will not be sewered, and the responsibility for the ongoing maintenance of the on-site sewerage systems is with the individual landowners. This is bound to fail at times, and it takes no imagination or sophisticated engineering skills to see that in the event of failure, coupled with a significant rainfall event, raw sewage is going to pour down the hillside and into Clifton Creek and possibly out into the lakes. I think raw sewage in itself poses significant public health risks, and it is mainly for this reason that I do not support this development as it has been proposed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Greason. Does anybody else wish to speak in support of the motion? Does anyone else wish to speak against the motion? No? Then I will put that motion to the vote. All those in... Sorry? Sorry? Yes. Yes, he does. Thank you. I'm glad you're there tonight. Councillor Stowe, would you like to exercise your right of reply?
I would. It's very kind of you, Mayor.
Yes.
I'd just like to point out that the septic, and I'd like to quote Martin here, our head planner, that the septic systems of the 1950s are very, very different to the modern ones of today. And that's why I asked the question before about could these systems cope, and I'm assured by our staff that they can in fact cope. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stowe. So now I'd like to put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. All those against? 2 against and 2 abstaining. Is that correct? So the people who are abstained are against 2 and 2. So the motion has failed. Is that correct?
Mayor, so just to be clear,
yeah, thank you.
People who abstained are not voting against, but the impact of that vote is that they're not supporting the opposite recommendation. So it's effectively a no vote, but I think it's clear we have to be clear that they're not voting against.
Right, thank you. So we had 2 in support of the motion, 2 against.
3 in support.
Gosh.
And 3 abstain.
Okay. So the motion has failed.
So the motion is lost. So
Yes.
the impact, and I might ask our acting governance manager just to be clear on the language so that that's recorded in the minutes.
Right, thank you.
Patricia?
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. So the motion is lost and it is not a decision of council. So effectively no decision has been made. So the alternate, the opposite decision is not, there is no opposite decision. This is just, the decision has been lost, there is no decision. Sorry, that wasn't as clear as it should have been.
So no decision is
So no decision has been
made on this matter.
yes.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. No decision has been made on this matter.
Is it possible to have more clarification on this, please? Stage?
We can always ask for points of clarification, yes, to make it clear, yes. What's your question, Councillor White?
Well, it was put to us as an officer recommendation to approve.
That was the motion?
Yes, there hasn't been a majority to do that yet. You're saying that it's confused me in that it's actually not knocked out of the park. Is it still a live application even though it hasn't got support from council? That's what I'm... So it's got support from officers. So where would this leave the decision and perhaps the proponent? What would the next stage be, please?
Yes, thank you, Stuart.
If I might, through you, Mayor. So council has not made a decision on this matter. Similarly, council has not made a decision to actively issue a notice of refusal or similar decision either. So it is not made a decision to refuse, but it has not made a decision to approve either. So it sits as there is no decision that's made, and ultimately then the matter, unless there is a forthcoming a different motion, the matter sits as for the proponent to consider their options in light of council having not made a decision.
Councillor White?
Thank you, Mayor. So I do understand that I'll use something in Kalimna that was council failed to make a decision in a required time. So we were pushed aside and it went straight to a tribunal. So would this have a time limit on it for a decision as such?
So I might ask Martin or Robert to confirm, but through you, Mayor. Yep.
Thanks, councillors. My understanding, and Robert, feel free to jump in, the applicant will have a right to appeal the failure to determine the application within the statutory timeframe. Just nod, thank you. So an applicant always has the right to appeal council's failure to determine an application within the statutory 60-day timeframe. The applicant has in fact had that option open to them for a period of time, but has obviously chosen not to do that because they had hoped for an outcome from council. So the applicant will have a right of appeal to VCAT on the basis that council has failed to determine the application. And it would seem to me that in the circumstances, it's unlikely that the council will determine the application, even if we were to bring it back to you. So I guess in the interest of transparency, what I'd be suggesting is that I would be advising the applicant that the option available to them at this stage is to take it to VCAT on the basis of a failure to determine.
Good. Thank you. Thanks for the question, Councillor White. Okay. I think we're ready to move on to the next item on the agenda, which is item 5.3.2, and we have a guest speaker for this item, and I think he's with us here.
Excuse me, Madam Mayor, can we just bring Councillor Buckley back into the meeting?
Oh, good idea. Thank you. Goodness, I'm relying on you, councillors, tonight. Good evening, Richard. I can see you've joined us there. We're just waiting for another. Yes, there's our other councillor who was attending virtually has just joined us. I believe that you want to speak. You would like to speak to this item on our agenda for 860 Stevenson's Road. So perhaps if you speak to the item first, and then we'll ask for it to be introduced by the council officer. I would offer you 5 minutes to speak to the item. Thank you, Mr Hawksley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I appreciate the opportunity again to be presenting before council this evening on an application. The application that's presented before you this evening is in respect to a two-lot subdivision to excise an existing dwelling on a property at 860 Stevenson's Road, Tambo Upper. This application's been going on now for quite some time, and we're finally glad to have it before council to have a decision once and for all. There seems to be a lot of concern, or the concerns by officers, that given the land is in the farming zone under the planning scheme, that the proposal doesn't necessarily do anything to add to agricultural production or otherwise protect farmland. We believe that the consideration of the provisions for farming and agriculture are disproportionate to, in this particular instance, in this location. Whilst the land is in the farming zone, this zone has been inherited by council through various changes over the course of time through previous planning schemes, as well as through changes at a state level and imposed upon council through the life of the East Gippsland planning scheme. So what you started off as land in the rural zone under the current planning scheme morphed or transformed into the farming zone with a different set of objectives and purposes. Now, the reality is, and if most of you know this area, it is hardly an area for agricultural production or viable agricultural production. And this is emphasised by the fact of a simple analysis of all land in the farming zone, knowing that there is land also in a rural living zone within relatively short proximity to this site. But in 1.5 kilometres of this site, you have just 3 properties at 40 hectares or more, 40 hectares being the minimum lot size in the farming zone other than with a dwelling excision. That's the provision allowing for a smaller lot to be created. So of 54 lots, we have 4 lots at 3 lots at 40 hectares or more. We subsequently have 4 lots in the range of 30 hectares. Now, many of you would understand through your experience in East Gippsland and even other rural areas, 30 hectares or 40 hectares is hardly a viable farm. It's hobby farming at best. Anyone working those properties of that size need a supplementary income. It's not the Beng Wardens of the world. It's not the Mitchell River Flats. It's not the Snowy River Flats where we have our prime agricultural land. Many of the lots in this location and within 1.5 kilometres are 8 hectares in size or less. This is, for all intents and purposes, a rural residential precinct. Unfortunately, the zone fails to recognise that. And as a consequence, the officers appear to be sticking literally to the provisions of the zone and not making a consideration on balance and in context with the location and its surrounds. And that's just as important as the provisions of the zone itself. They also raise concerns about being inconsistent with the Twin Rivers strategy that was developed 10 years ago and yet has not been subject to review. That strategy or that study did not take into account land within the farming zone. If it had, it could have recognised precincts like this one that have been lost to farming and actually offer a rural residential purpose or use. So, ladies and gentlemen, tonight I call on you to not support the recommendation put forward by the officers and, in fact, overturn and determine to support this application as a reasonable outcome for the site. We maintain a balance allotment in excess of 40 hectares, as is the provisions of the zone, despite what's around it in terms of much smaller allotments. So the proposal does not directly increase the number of houses in this location. We are excising an existing dwelling of 1.5 hectares, an absolute minimum to maintain, if you like, in support or in reflection of the zone, and policies the optimum amount of land on the balance that's able to be used or continue to be used in a grazing purpose, dry land grazing purpose. So, ladies, Madam Mayor and councillors, as I say, I do call on you to review this decision and trust that you can understand the context of this location and instead of supporting the officer's recommendation, but rather support the proposal as we have presented it to you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr Hoxley. Appreciate your time as well. Okay, I will now hand over to Mr Chris Wayne to introduce this item for councillors. Thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. Councillors, before you is a report seeking your endorsement to refuse to grant a planning permit application for a two-lot subdivision at 860 Stevenson Road, Tambo Upper. The key points of the report for Council to consider are that the application is considered by officers to be inconsistent with state and local policy in relation to land zone for farming purposes. The policy broadly speaks to encouraging consolidation of land and preventing outcomes which will result in fragmentation of agricultural land. Approval of the proposal would continue the negative trend of approvals in the broad precinct, which have made a large area into effective rural living precincts, to the detriment of genuine farm activity and reducing potential for intensive agriculture activity in the precinct into the future, not just at the current time. Also present this evening are Manager of Planning Martin Richardson and Statutory Planning Coordinator Robert Pringle to answer any questions related to the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Wayne. Councillors, are there any questions, please? Councillor Crook.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Chris. I understand why the proponent would potentially be looking to do this, but I also have concerns and understand why the officers are making the recommendation that they are. We need to protect agricultural land. It's a mainstay of our regional economy. We also need to provide adequate opportunities for people who wish to live in a rural living zone. I wonder, maybe it's a question for you, Martin, under the Rural Land Use Strategy draft, or as it stands at the moment, where does this subject land sit with our proposals for it into the future?
Thank you, Councillor Crook, and through you, Madam Mayor. The draft Rural Land Use Strategy seeks to reinforce a state and local, long-standing state and local planning policy, which is to protect rural land from subdivision and the development of residential uses. It seeks to provide clearer guidance, and clearly that guidance is required. At the moment, we have a set of policies which are clear. That is, that land which is zoned farming, and I accept Mr Hoxley's point of view that even though it's zoned farming, it's not farming land, but the reality is it is zoned farming, and that is the primary policy position of state and local government, is that if it's zoned farming, then we need to protect it from fragmentation. The draft Rural Land Use Strategy, which has a lot of work to do, and I also acknowledge that a number of submissions on the draft Rural Land Use Strategy point out that we need more flexibility. But my comment would be that if Council makes incremental changes to policy, decision by decision by decision, rather than take a strategic view about the protection of rural land in this Shire, then it will be death by 1,000 cuts. My last comment would be that there was reference earlier in the meeting to the establishment of the Agricultural Sector Advisory Group. When I presented the draft Rural Land Use Strategy to that group earlier this year, not a single person in that room argued with the concept of restraining the fragmentation of rural land. Now, there will be discussion about whether or not land is viable, whether or not you can farm it, whether or not you can make money out of agriculture. But the primary policy position is that if the land is zoned farming, then we should seek to retain it for that possible use in the future. And I will also add that we've just dealt with an application for 203 rural living lots in land zoned for rural living. That's what zoning is for. It's to direct development to appropriate locations. And if Council wishes to rezone this land, then we will pursue that for you in the future. But what I'm suggesting is that we should not make decisions to change policy application by application, we should take a strategic view to it. Thank you.
Yes, follow-up question, Councillor Crook.
Thanks, Martin, and I appreciate and agree with that approach. I guess my question was more to potentially how this land will be zoned into the future, and whether there was intention under the rural land use strategy to see a change in the current zoning of this particular piece of land.
The draft rural land use strategy, Councillor, contemplates the rezoning of the land to a zone called Rural Activity Zone, which still maintains the primacy of farming as the main use within the zone, with 40 hectare minimums. It does allow, the Rural Activity Zone does allow for other rural compatible uses, tourism and bed and breakfasts and wineries and fruit shops and things like that. But the Rural Activity Zone, which is intended in the rural land use strategy, still maintains minimum subdivision lots, a presumption against housing, etc. And again, if in the development of that strategy, the council wishes to see us move faster towards a rural living style for this area, then that would require some further assessment of land capability. Because we do need to bear in mind that we can't just take a blanket approach and rezone land without looking at the specific capability and suitability of areas within this precinct. So yes, in the long term, the plan could be that this land transitions towards a more of a rural lifestyle area. But again, I would recommend that that's done in a strategic fashion, not simply by taking each application as it comes and allowing residential development and subdivision of land. So the assessment of this area for future rural lifestyle is on the cards, but we need to go through that process.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Crook. Councillor Reeves, please.
Yep, thanks, Mayor. Officers, my question relates to the discussion in the report around the original planning unit or the subdivision history, the fact that this has been divided and sliced a number of times, and the original controls would allow for 2.4 total lots, and there isn't any provision for any legal agreements to prevent any further subdivision. That's my understanding. So if this was approved, then it could be subdivided again. There is no stopping an applicant from applying again and seeking another excision, and based on a potential precedent, that could happen again and again and again. Is that correct?
Thank you, Councillor, and through you, Madam Mayor. It would be our intention, if councillors were to move an alternate recommendation, that we would appreciate that an agreement is lodged that would prevent further dwelling development and further subdivision until such time as the land is rezoned. There has been a past history in the planning scheme where the farming zone had a mandatory requirement for such condition. That was in place for about a decade. And you would note that in that decade, no applications were made in relation to this land. And when that requirement was removed again, the applications recommenced.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Reeves. Are there any further questions, councillors? If not, there is an officer recommendation in front of you. Do I have a motion? Thank you, Jane. You'd like to move the motion? And Councillor Reeves seconding the motion. Would you like to speak to the motion, Councillor Greason?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I do support the motion, mainly for the reasons that Martin Richardson has and Robert have explained, that it's not the time yet for this land to be developed. I do think it's pretty obvious that in the not too distant future, land through here will be developed further. It's 15 minutes from Lakes and 15 minutes from Bairnsdale, and I just think it's prime land for people to live in. But I support the motion as it stands now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Greason. Councillor Reeves, you wish to speak to the motion?
And I agree with that as well, on the basis that at the moment this proposal is a disorderly fragmentation, and I think good planning is around orderly and planned development, and this is not that at this stage.
Thank you, Councillor Reeves. Is the motion opposed? Does anyone else wish to speak, either for or against the motion? If not, I put that motion to the vote. All those in favour? Sorry, could you just keep your hand up, Councillor Allen? Thank you. So 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. Against? 2 people abstaining. The motion is carried. Is that right? Good. Maths. Yes. Okay. Item 5.3.3 is the submission on the draft marine and coastal strategy. And Mr. Wayne, would you like to introduce this one, please?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. Councillors, before you is a report regarding a submission on the draft marine and coastal strategy, where the officer recommendation is to endorse the draft submission. So key points in the report for consideration, that the draft marine and coastal strategy includes a number of important initiatives to improve the management of Victoria's marine and coastal environments, including an updating of strategic and management plans, improved education and interpretation programs for the community, and importantly, adaptation in the face of coastal hazards and climate change impacts. Overall, Council's draft submission offers support to these initiatives. However, there is a concern that many of the actions in the draft strategy require resourcing and that funding has not been fully identified. The draft strategy includes several responsibilities for action by local government, and there is a lack of clarity about how those responsibilities will be funded at this stage. This concern is shared by the Municipal Association of Victoria in its submission. The draft submission that you have before you is recommended for endorsement. Also present online this evening for any technical questions is Manager of Planning, Martin Richardson. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Any questions from councillors about this one? Councillor White, please, and then Councillor Buckley.
Thank you. Just my question relates to something that's is a real issue for us with having such a large length of coastline in terms of the cost to us in terms of erecting more and renewing old seawalls. Will this go in any way help us to achieve funding with regards to these to the problems we already have?
Thank you, Councillor. Through you, Mayor. Yes and no, but very briefly, look, the policy has some very good sentiment. The strategy has some very good sentiment in it, particularly in relation to the management of coastal hazards and risks and climate change impacts. It doesn't so much go specifically to the question about defending our coast, more about retreating, but particularly around the management of coastal ecosystems. So the way that we can manage buffers as foreshore environments change and suffer from the risks of coastal hazards. However, yes, the strategy does have a number of initiatives in it for coastal planning, management of foreshores in the face of climate change and sea level rise. As to funding, that's the key issue that we've raised in this submission, is that whilst the intention of the strategy is admirable, there are questions to be answered about where the resources come from. However, there are steps outlined in the strategy for that to be addressed. And so, Councillor, yes, the strategy will assist in the management of those issues. The devil will be in the detail in terms of whether funding comes from the state government to assist the council to manage those impacts on the foreshores.
Thank you. Our General Manager of Assets and Environment, Ms Weigel, would like to contribute to this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Councillor White, for the question and part of the answer from Mr Richardson. Perhaps I can add the other part to it, which is, as you've rightly raised, Councillor White, the cost of replacing seawalls is considerable for a council such as ours, with seawalls through so many of our foreshore towns. So in addition to putting forward submissions to the strategy, we're also weaving this into our advocacy effort and also into our our asset planning work. So we're actively working with DELP and others on designs for the replacement of our seawalls, and actively lobbying as part of our advocacy effort for funding for the continuation of this work. I think the work that Mr Canizaro's team is working on around our advocacy document includes quite a strong section on the need for the coastal funding that the state uses for coastal hazards to continue. Our understanding is this is the last year of the budget as it currently stands at a state level. So we're certainly advocating strongly for that to be continued, and believe that we've got, in Lakes Entrance alone, there's probably something like another $20 million needed to replace all the seawalls there. So councillors can appreciate the breadth of the issue that that Gippsland and East Gippsland is facing in terms of ageing coastal infrastructure. So the submission is a great step, but I think we need to follow that on with more discreet and detailed advocacy work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Buckley, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a two-part question. The first part is, how much is it likely to cost? Do we know? Do we have costings around about what we're asking for, or what this is going to cost? And the second part is, in Action 4.7, it says seeks to enable and facilitate timely data-driven planning scheme amendment processes to reflect sea level rise projects, coastal hazards, etc., etc. It goes on for climate change. I'm just wondering, do we have any data that reflects there has been a sea level rise due to climate change?
Thank you, Councillor Buckley, and through you, Madam Mayor. First question, no, there are no estimates with how much. The strategy does include some reference to allocations which have been made by the state government for dealing with some coastal issues, but that's just a small minority of the recommendations of the strategy have been funded. So none of the others have been costed, and in particular, some of the costs that come with this strategy relate to your second question. The second point is about data-driven decisions. Yes, there is significant data and evidence available to indicate that sea level rise is occurring. Understood that there are many different opinions in the community on that, but there is significant data to suggest that we're facing increasing risks of sea level rise and coastal inundation. And I can't give any local examples, but the story of the beach at Inverloch is a classic Gippsland coast scenario. However, the planning scheme, evidence-based planning scheme amendments is an important piece of work, regardless of your views on climate change. It's actually about inundation. So we have the land subject to inundation overlay in our planning scheme is in dire need of updating because it's not current, and the strategy refers to the need to do that work. Again, we would agree entirely with that intention. But the question is, where are the resources coming from for that kind of work to be done so that we can update our flood mapping and deal with issues to do with normal flooding, let alone coastal inundation due to climate change?
So just to clarify, we don't know how much it's going. If I put a vote to this in favour of it, and I understand that it's very important to look after infrastructure and flooding, etc., but if this goes through, we don't know where the money is going to come from. We don't know how much it's going to cost. So what happens from here?
I'm happy to.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. The strategy actually does have
Mr. Richardson, sorry to interrupt. Ms. Weigel would like to respond to that question, if you don't mind.
She's more senior than me, Mrs. Mayor. You can go ahead.
As part of our asset planning, we're actually undertaking a lot of work in this space. I guess what Councillor Buckley, though, the Act is already in place. So the strategy follows on from the changes to the Marine and Coastal Act, which are already...
Sorry, Ms. Weigel, I can't hear you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So
could you...
Yeah, the strategy actually supports the Marine and Coastal Act, which is already a gazetted act and sets a whole lot of requirements for how infrastructure is provided. So the strategy really builds on that and provides further guidelines around that. So the fact of the formalisation of the Act a couple of years ago actually puts in place some of those requirements. So when we're doing things like the slip road works or replacing a jetty, we actually have to get approval from the relevant state authorities, and we must be able to demonstrate how it meets the current Marine and Coastal Act. So therefore, the cost is not a cost that will only become required and have implications for council once the strategy is adopted. We're already seeing the implications of that through the adoption of the Act. So therefore, as part of our asset management system, one of our asset management plans is around the coastal assets, our marine and coastal assets. So we have a very clear understanding about what the cost implications of this for us going forward are going to be. But they will be significant as a council with multiple boat ramps, jetties, and foreshores that we manage along with the seawalls. It's going to be a really significant cost for us, which is why it's really important that we put together submissions for these sorts of strategies and responses to the strategies, but also undertake a lot of advocacy around our coastal assets and the requirement for the state government to not just set policy and policy direction, but also come to the party with the funding of what the requirements of that direction are. So we've been relatively successful in attracting government funding to assist with the upgrade of some of our seawalls, but there needs to be a lot more funding that comes from the state government into this area. Because as you've identified, Councillor Buckley, this is not an area that council can bear alone. It needs to come with state funding. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms Weigel. Councillor Buckley, happy to proceed? Okay.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you. Good. Councillor Reeves, please.
So just a clarification, we're not approving a strategy, we're approving a submission which raises all the questions about the strategy. That's correct, isn't it? Yep, so that's what, Councillor, that's what we're doing here. So the question is, have we provided strong enough wording in that submission to express our concerns, especially around resourcing? Somebody say yes, please.
That's a question too.
Yes, we have.
Okay.
But my only point here is that, yes, we've made a really strong submission.
Yes.
And Mr Richardson and his team have done a great job on that.
Yep.
But we can't lie on our laurels there. We need to continue the advocacy effort to
Great.
make sure that there's funding to support the statements we're making in our submission.
Good, thank you. Now my next question is, this is titled A Marine and Coastal Strategy. Now we are a shire that doesn't just have a marine and coastal environment. We have an estuarine, a lake, a riverine, a riparian. Where does this strategy stop? Does it stop up the Tambo at Bruthen? Where does it go and where does it end?
It normally stops at the main road intersection with a river system, so it covers all of the Gippsland lakes as well.
A main road intersection with a river.
With the first bridge across
Right,
a
okay.
a
Thanks, that's
river.
a great definition. Let's move the bridges. Swan Reach, rightio.
In some respects, yes.
And Malakuta Inlet?
Yes. Yep,
Wallagara
all
Ridge, Johnson's Bridge.
So approximately a kilometre of riverfront as well.
Right,
You know, that first,
okay.
But
It's
yes,
significant.
It's significant for us when you
It's
think
a
about the Gippsland
significant
lakes as
exposure.
well.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for those questions. Absolutely, yes. Are there any further questions, councillors? If not, there is a recommendation in front of you regarding the submission. Councillor Crook is moving the motion. The recommendation, I assume. Councillor Reeves is seconding that. Would you like to speak to the motion, Councillor Crook?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is, in fact, as Councillor Reeves has suggested, this is a submission to the current government strategy, which results from the Marine and Coastal Act, which is already law. It is in response to a number of challenges, not least which are driven by climate change. We have hundreds of kilometres of coastline in our Shire, and I won't say a majority, but a huge proportion of our population living in these environments. it is a very challenging space, and it is a rapidly changing and evolving space as well. This submission articulates well, I believe, some of those challenges, and also highlights to the state government that these challenges are not going to be met for free, and that where we are the designated land manager, we will require resourcing because we do not have the rates base to implement these actions as they are required to protect and manage the environment in our communities.
Thank you. Councillor Crook. Councillor Reeves, you wish to speak to the motion? Yeah. Is the motion opposed? Does anyone else wish to speak for or against the motion? If not, I put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Councillor Greason, I can see your hand. Yes. Thank you. The motion is carried. Thank you. Item 5.3.4 on the agenda. I think we're just keeping an eye on the time here, aren't we? East Gippsland Shire Council Arts and Heritage Grants, round 1. Mr Wayne, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, before you is a report asking or seeking your endorsement to adopt the funding recommendations for round 1 of the Arts and Heritage Grants program to the value of $23,500. The Council Arts and Heritage Grants program started in 2007 and is managed by the Council Enterprises Unit. The program aims to support individuals and local organisations to present and or develop arts activity and heritage projects within our community. The program runs in line with the Council Community Grants program and is made up of 4 available streams: major arts projects, heritage projects, and a quick response grants round as well. This round, being round 1 of the Arts and Heritage Grants program, opened on the 2nd of June and closed on the 4th of August. The round attracted 7 applicants requesting a total of $39,080 to support projects, with a total project value of $214,320. Officers approved funding to the value of $23,500, which leaves a remaining budget for round 2 of $18,500. Unfortunately, not all applicants will receive funding this round. However, the applicants will continue to work with council officers to obtain funding through other streams or work with officers closely to strengthen their application for future rounds. A list of applications received and the panel's commentary when reviewing each applicant can be found in the report's attachments. This report is presented for your consideration. Thank you, Mayor.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mr Wayne. Councillors, are there any questions about this item? Oh, I love it too. Beck, we've got Beck on the line. Can I just ask a quick question? Beck, we love these funding rounds. They're fantastic. Is there something you would like to highlight about this particular funding round? Is there something very special about this? You need to unmute, please, Beck.
This particular funding round isn't mine, Mayor.
Okay. Okay.
The community grants is. I'm here to help support Chris.
Okay.
But it's really important at this time for COVID.
Yes.
Both rounds.
Yes.
So.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. We've got a couple of other questions, I think. Councillor Buckley.
Thank you. Look, I suppose my question is in and around the amount. I always love to see art, culture, anything to do with community coming together and supporting creativity, because it's so important for mental health. But this seems like a drop in the bucket. It's really, in my view, insufficient monetarily. I would like to see a lot more funding go towards this sector. So I'm wondering, is there a reason why these grants, they're quite small, and maybe we need to be looking at our budget, and certainly I would like to just raise the point that we need an arts precinct in Gippsland, in East Gippsland. I think it's an imperative, and although I think this is fabulous, it's just more of a comment, just not enough.
Okay. You didn't have a question, Councillor Buckley?
I did. The question was, do you think that the financial position in regards to these funds is adequate?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Buckley. What I would say is Council contributes significantly outside of this funding program to to the arts, in excess of $500,000 with a lot of our other programs. On top of that, officers are looking into a creative arts strategy, which will also look at these type of funding programs, and also the development of other other arts infrastructure programs, if you will, which would consider such of the things as precincts, etc.
Yep, indeed.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Great.
Good to know.
Councillor Crook, did you have a question also?
Maybe just point of clarification. Are the grants only open to organisations or individuals able to apply as well?
Thank you. So thanks for the question, Councillor Crook. So they're open for individual artists as well as organisations. So it's not restricted by, by size of applicant group.
Terrific. If there are no further questions, a question, Councillor Stowe? No. Okay, if there are no further questions, then Councillor Stowe would like to move the officer's recommendation. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Greason, thank you. Councillor Stowe, would you like to speak to the motion, please?
Thank you, Mayor. Look, we all know how important the arts are to us all, and also how important they are to the mental health of the community, as Sonia just pointed out. And I see these have been divided amongst a lot of very worthwhile organisations. I look forward to seeing them come to fruition and supporting them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stowe. Councillor Greason, you wish to speak to the motion?
Just to support what people have said, and I think as much support we can put into the arts all sorts of arts in throughout the region, the better. Madam Mayor, I'm afraid I have to go. My computer's just about to die and I can't plug it in anywhere. So if that's okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. You can't hold on to vote for the motion, Councillor Greason?
Yes.
Okay,
I'll wait till
thank you. Is the motion opposed? Does anyone else wish to speak for or against the motion?
I'd like to speak for it.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Councillor Crook, you'd like to speak for the motion, and then Councillor Reeves, please.
Sure, I'll try and keep it brief so Councillor Greason can vote on it. I'd just like to point out that this is exceptional value for our council. We are, in effect, investing just short of $40,000, but we're looking to derive a project value of in excess of $200,000. And that's really a credit to all the people who put in and contribute their time and resources to make these projects what they are. So I thank all the applicants and wish the project every success.
Thank you, Councillor Crook. Councillor Reeves.
I'd just like to acknowledge the diversity of art, performing art, fixed sculptures, visual arts. It's just fantastic. And in particular, as you were saying, Councillor Crook, the investment by the community groups and individuals is significant. I am very aware of the work that's been done by the Marlow ratepayers around that particular project. They've been working on this for months and months and months. So it's just really terrific to see this up.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to speak either for or against the motion? If not, I put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. The motion is carried. Councillor Greason, thank you for joining us. All the best.
Thank you, everyone.
Final item on our agenda this evening is 5.3.5, and it's around the Community Grants Project, grant funding round one. Thank you, Mr. Wayne.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. Councillors, before you is a report seeking your endorsement to adopt the funding recommendations for the Community Grants Program for round one for the 21-22 financial year to the value of $45,696. This program is managed by the Community Programs Unit and provides funding opportunities for East Gippsland-based community groups and organisations. Applications need to demonstrate how activities or offence will contribute to strengthen and create elusive, healthy, safe and resilient East Gippsland communities. The program grant round aligns with the Arts and Heritage grant round, which was just noted before, and opened on the 2nd of June and closed on the 4th of August. Round 2 is scheduled to open in January 2022. The budget allocation for the community project grants is $111,000, $4,500 of which is allocated to Council's Smarty Grants program usage fee. There are 2 funding rounds each financial year, with the full amount assigned budget allocated each year across the 2 rounds. This round attracted 18 applications, the same number as round 1 in 2020. Applications are slightly down on previous years, and this is thought to be due to COVID restrictions impacting delivery of community projects and events, contractors' availability due to ongoing bushfire recovery and rebuilding, and external funding availability. The maximum amount available to apply for is $5,000, and all requested amounts require a dollar-on-dollar contribution, or a 50% of which can be in kind. 11 applicants met the eligibility criteria for recommendation. Officers will continue to work with applicants who do not meet this eligibility criteria for further development to meet guideline requirements for future programs. The recommended amount or total contribution from council is $45,696 to generate a total investment of $97,917 overall to the community. A list of all applications received and guidelines can be found in the attachments. Also present tonight is Acting Coordinator Community Programs, Rebecca Pantry, who is available to respond to questions of a technical nature. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillors, are there any questions? Councillor Stowe?
Yes, could I just ask, how important are these small grants to the small communities? For example, the Omeo Soldiers Memorial Hall Committee, for example, that they're polishing floors, they're buying new equipment, they're improving their facilities. Would that be very important to these small communities?
Extremely important because they provide their facilities for limited or free of charge in some instances, especially during COVID, and community groups can't afford to all the maintenance costs that are required to provide really nice, well-maintained facilities. We've got ageing infrastructure, so it supports those communities, especially in our remote and regional centres.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you. Now, we've got 2 more questions. I'm just looking at the time and wondering if we might just ask for a motion to extend our meeting. Do we have specific wording about that? No specific wording. So you would like to move a motion to extend the meeting to allow us to...
Well, I was going to move a motion actually to pass this, but...
we haven't quite finished.
However,
yes.
I'd be happy to accede to your request.
All right. Thank you, Councillor Stowe. So if the motion is to extend in order to complete the final item on our agenda. Okay, thank you. You're happy to move that motion? Councillor Crook, you're happy to second? Is that motion opposed? No, I'll put that motion to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. The motion is carried. So I think we had Councillor White with a question, please.
Thank you. Nothing against the Cassellers community, Rebecca, but I was just wondering, it's only the project title is called Living It Up. I was just wondering if you could expand on that, please. I know where it is. It's out at the end of a dead-end road. And I have visited that. We have met before at that site, the CEO and myself, and they're a great bunch of people. So I was just interested in what their project entails. Thank you.
It is a music event that will be supported both by delivery of bands and supporting community to perform.
Good. Thank you, Councillor White. Councillor Van de Gill, please.
Thanks, Beck. I have a question in regards to, I guess, the 50% allocation or commitment that individuals or organisations need to make. So we're talking about a volunteer commitment here. It says that one person could no longer commit because they couldn't provide 50% of the funding. Like, I see that as a real shame and a barrier to certain people receiving funding. So what is the reason for the 50% contribution, as valuable as it is? But does that mean that in the future we let go of potentially great projects because someone else can't provide 50% of the funding? So
yes, there was one application that was made. So I asked for further clarification on their project because there wasn't enough evidence for material costs, and when the quotes came back in, they couldn't contribute 50% of that project, so they wouldn't have been able to deliver their project. So the 50%, half of that can be made up of in-kind. So for the total project, they're only coming up with a cash contribution of 25%.
But do we see it as some people who need these projects to happen, do we see that as a barrier? Like, I guess we're not really enabling them to make their projects come to life because of that. Like, I see that.
That can be made up of other grants, other contributions by community. It can be ticket sales. It can be made up of lots of things. But it could be a barrier to some projects. But it's seen as a way for the group to contribute to the project and to make sure that delivery can happen.
Beck, Mr. Wayne would like to answer this question also. Thank you.
So just to contribute to Beck's response as well, so part of the program is to ensure that we help fund these type of events, but also support the continuation of these events so they can one day have other funding allocation, etc., to stand on their own. So if we believe in future years that getting that 50% is a challenge, officers work with them on strengthening the program, so to speak, and the funding allocation, and trying to help them almost stand on their own feet at some point in time if it's an ongoing project. So that's a lot of the work behind the scenes that's not captured in this type of funding program, is also the conversations afterwards when we learn that they might not be able to get that 50%. So it is around supporting the current program, but then if we feel that they're not going to support it on the 50% contribution in the future, the work that happens behind the scenes is pretty substantial with Beck and the team.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Buckley, you have a question?
Yes, just a quick one. Rebecca, once these grants are successful, does the council also then help the applicants with the promotion of whatever their project is? Do we somehow help support with letting people know that these events are happening through our councillor homepage and all those sorts of things?
Yes, and through our network, so through the community programs.
Thank you very much.
And council's acknowledged as well, so that's part of our funding agreement.
Very good. Good to know. Thank you.
Great. Councillors, if there are no more questions, then there is a recommendation in front of you. Do I have a motion, please? Councillor Van de Gel, you'd like to move the motion. Councillor Buckley would like to second. Councillor Van de Gel, would you like to speak to the motion?
I don't think I have too much to add. I think we all agree that this is what makes our council great, having small community groups be able to deliver their projects, and especially in more remote areas. So every single time this comes on the agenda, it's probably when I'm the most excited. So definitely happy to support the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Van de Gel. Councillor Buckley, would you like to speak to the motion?
I support all of Councillor Van de Gel's sentiments.
Thank you. Is the motion opposed? Does anybody else wish to speak for or against the motion? Councillor Reeves, please.
Councillors, look, I think it's fantastic. I'd really just get so much pleasure out of seeing these applications. In particular, because I have some very close friends in Cassilis, and anything to improve their singing capability is going to be a great investment. But in all seriousness, one that really has caught my eye is the Reading Out of Poverty Books from Birth project. That's extraordinary. You know, it's so creative that this group have managed to co-opt Sunrise Bairnsdale and work with Griffiths Estate Charitable Fund and distribute books through a whole range of different partnerships, play groups, parent groups, libraries, GP clinics and child healthcare centres. How fantastic is that? You know, just a real shout out to that group of people. I hope I meet them, and I just want to really in particular acknowledge that one. That one is really amazing.
Thank you, Councillor Reeves. Councillor White, you'd like to speak to the motion?
Yes, I would.
Please go ahead.
I'm just actually impressed with the diversity and the area that this covers. You know, it's right across our shire, and I think that's really good. It's showing a lot of fairness in the distribution of these funds. So good luck, and support those all these entities in their endeavours, and just hopefully we can see these events occur without the restrictions of that we're placed under at this moment.
Indeed. Thank you. Does anybody else wish to speak, either for or against the motion? If not, I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. The motion is carried. Mr CEO, do we have any items of urgent and other business?
No, Madam Mayor.
Wonderful. Then I will declare the meeting closed, and I would like to thank my fellow councillors and the executive for their support and assistance. There's been some great questioning tonight in some of the items, and thank you for all our other officers for supporting the meeting so well. Thank you and good evening.